Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something cozy, chilly and downright brutal. You're not tucked in your own bed, you're not safe in your house, you're crammed in a cramped attic somewhere in Victorian London, and outside that winter wind is screaming like wild animals. The sky's got the colour of dirty dishwater and the stench of chimney smoke has already seeped through the door. You're sprawled on a flimsy mattress packed with horsehair and straw pushed against a splintered wall. Your breath floats in front of your face. That's not some poetic image. It's literal frozen vapour, drifting upward and crystallising on the inside of the window right above you, decorating the glass with pale white ice feathers. Your blanket hardly covers your legs, your knees are throbbing, and you haven't even stirred yet. You don't want to, because the moment you lift those covers, the cold rushes in like getting slapped. You won't believe this, but folks used to smash the ice in their morning wash bowls. Inside their homes, they'd wake up, pour water from a pitcher and discover it frozen completely solid. So no, your morning rinse isn't going to happen. Alright, before you settle in too much, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. But only if it feels right, and hey, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. What's the time where you are right now? Lower those lights, get that fan running for some ambient sound. And let's ease into tonight's little journey. It starts with your toes. They're the first to give you away. Even beneath 2 layers of socks mended by your grandmother and reinforced with thread, they've gone rigid and frozen. You curl them instinctively, but it's already too late. The cold has already claimed them. The bottoms of your feet feel like chunks of stale cheese, and the chill climbs upward. Ankles, knees, thighs. You attempt rubbing your legs with your hands, but even your fingers are too frozen to make any difference. You finally yank the blanket back. There's a burst of frigid air, and you gasp. A shiver tears through your ribs like something tiny and sharp, just raced down your spine with a needle. Your breath catches. You sit up, but carefully, because if you move too quickly, the dizziness hits you. That's the other thing. You haven't eaten breakfast yet, and your stomach definitely knows it. Your tiny attic is tucked just beneath the slope of a roof, and the wind overhead makes a deep, humming noise like someone blowing across the opening of a bottle. The walls are bent, and the floorboards don't quite line up properly. There's a draft somewhere behind you, one you've never managed to seal, not even with that stuffed sack full of sawdust. The cold sneaks in regardless. You could swear it's got a life of its own. You shuffle toward the basin. The water's solid as stone. You rap your knuckles against it. Dull thud. No splash. You peek at the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Your hair is matted on one side, sticking out on the other, and your face looks like it belongs to a ghost. Eyes circled, lips slightly purple, skin a dull, sickly yellow from the coal fumes. You try to wash anyway. You dip the cloth into the icy water, press it against your cheek and wince. It stings so badly you nearly cry. It's like scrubbing yourself with winter itself. You dress fast as you can manage. First comes the base layer. Flannel, scratchy but essential. Then stockings, 2 pairs if you've got them. You step into your trousers or petticoat, depending on who you are, and try to avoid stepping on the ice-covered floorboards. They crack when your heels strike them, then your blouse or shirt, then the coat too flimsy to really help much. A scarf you knitted yourself. Your boots, stiff with dampness from yesterday's snow, take forever to slip on. You tug open the attic door and a blast of air smacks your face. You make your way down the narrow steps, past the others still sleeping in lower rooms, ducking past a bucket on the landing. Overflow from last night's leak. Now a frozen block of ice. That's not even the worst part. Downstairs, in the shared kitchen, the ashes from the fire have gone stone cold. You prod them, but they don't budge. The fire's dead. It always dies. Coal costs money. You grab for the newspaper someone used to wrap their dinner, not to read, to cram under your clothes. Folks do that here. Layers of crumpled paper between shirt and skin. Anything to stop the wind. It works surprisingly well. One of Queen Victoria's guardsmen supposedly stuffed 5 layers of the Times beneath his uniform to survive his morning duty. You light a candle stub. It flickers against the damp walls. Your fingers are already going numb again, and you haven't even opened the door. Outside waits the real test, but first you need to dig into that chunk of stale bread hidden in the cupboard. You bite it, and it's hard as rock. You chew anyway, because that's the only breakfast you're getting today. And tomorrow's outlook, even colder. You step outside. The cold doesn't strike you. That would imply impact, a blow you can brace against. No, this seeps. It seeps into your collar, beneath your sleeves, down the backs of your knees and behind your ears. It doesn't matter how tightly you wind the scarf, it discovers the gaps. It always discovers the gaps. Your boots crunch onto the snowy, slippery cobbles. It rained last night, then it froze. So what's beneath your feet now is a dangerous mix of slush, ice, and whatever the horses deposited before the frost locked in. You step carefully, everyone does. You watch as a gentleman dressed in a long coat and top hat slips near the curb and barely avoids breaking his tailbone. He doesn't swear. That would be undignified. He just stares down at the pavement like it betrayed him, then continues hobbling. The city is grey, not just from clouds, from coal. You see it in the air itself. It hangs low and filthy, wrapping the rooftops in a greasy veil. The smell is sharp, like burnt toast and metal, and it sticks to your tongue. You can taste it when you breathe. You pass chimney sweeps already at work, their faces blackened with soot. One of them flashes you a grin. What few teeth he has left show bright against the grime. He's a boy, maybe 11, maybe younger. He's already halfway up a ladder, dragging a long rod behind him. You glance down an alley and see laundry hung between buildings, stiff as boards. Sheets don't dry in this weather. They freeze mid-flutter and stay like that, frozen like stage curtains in a play. Nobody wants to watch. But you've got things to do. Errands, maybe, or work, or just the daily struggle for warmth. You stop at a stall. The vendor is hunched over a brazier, attempting to warm his hands over a few lumps of glowing coal. He's selling roasted chestnuts. They smell warm, sweet, smoky. You haven't had one in weeks. You consider buying a handful. Then you remember you need to save those pennies for fuel. Food can wait. As you turn away, a gust of wind picks up, not strong, but sneaky. It winds around your ankles and slips up your back, and you shudder. A woman walking beside you lets out a cough, a deep, wet sound from deep in her lungs. She doesn't cover her mouth. Her hands are buried too deep in her sleeves. That sound follows you. Everyone's coughing these days. You glance down at your gloves. They're mismatched. One has a hole at the thumb. You shove your hands into your coat instead, but the lining's gone threadbare. No help there. You pass a shop window. There's condensation on the inside of the glass, and you see oranges, actual ones, a luxury, bright and glowing, like they don't belong here. They almost look warm. You don't go in. Instead, you head back toward home, the wind tugging at your coat the entire way. You pass a woman shaking a rug from a window. You pass a dog curled on a stoop, its fur dusted with frost. You pass a constable stamping his feet at the corner, muttering to himself about chilblains. You think about your own toes, they've gone numb again. You don't know if that's good or bad, at least they're not hurting. A man with frost in his beard bumps your shoulder. He doesn't apologise. He's staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, moving like someone chasing a ghost. You don't blame him. This is just the start of winter. January's barely begun. February will be worse. You'll need more paper, more socks, maybe a miracle. As you climb the stairs to your attic again, you notice that the water in the bucket on the landing is now not just frozen, but cracked. The ice has expanded and split the sides of the pail. It leaks slowly, a pale ring spreading on the wood. You crawl back under your blanket. You don't even try to undress. You just curl around your own arms, breathing slowly, watching your breath drift into the air again. Somehow, you sleep. Somehow, you'll wake up tomorrow and do it all over again. Because that's what winter in Victorian London does. It keeps you moving, not with hope, but because stopping means freezing and nobody wants to be found frozen, mouth open, clutching a crust of bread. Not yet. You wake to a faint scraping sound downstairs, someone stirring the ashes. It's still dark out, the kind of deep bluish dark that says dawn is at least an hour away, but the cold has already wrapped around your ribs like a vice. Your joints ache like you've been working all night. You haven't. You were asleep. That's just what cold sleep feels like. Someone coughs below, the same deep rattle you heard on the street yesterday. It's become a soundtrack. You lie still, listening, waiting to hear the next sound. There it is, the coal scuttle being dragged out from under the stairs. It's mostly empty. You already know that because you checked yesterday, but someone's hoping there's still a few crumbs left clinging to the corners. You pull your coat on over your nightclothes and tiptoe down, following the shuffling footsteps. The hallway smells of damp wood and something sour, maybe vinegar, maybe mould. In the kitchen, your neighbour is bent over the grate, poking yesterday's ashes like they might spring back to life. A pot of water sits on the edge of the hearth. It's not boiling. It's not even warm. He sighs and sits back, defeated. You check the coal bin. A single lump remains, the size of your fist. You both stare at it. You don't burn coal carelessly. Coal costs money. A shilling's worth might warm the room for a day if you're careful, but most families stretch it for a week, burning just enough to take the edge off. You learn to be selective with your suffering. Heat the kitchen, not the bedrooms. Warm water for washing, but not for bathing. Cook in batches, reheat nothing. This one lump, it's a gift, a small, filthy treasure. You break it in half. That's the thing about coal. It's hard and brittle, but with the right tap, it splits. You place your half gently into the fireplace and strike a match. The flame flickers, it hesitates, then it dies. Not dry enough, or too little paper beneath it. Maybe both. You try again, tearing a corner from the newspaper lining your shoes. This time it catches and the coal glows faintly. Not red, not yet, but it promises to be. You and your neighbour sit close, knees nearly touching, faces tilted toward the fragile heat, like flowers to the sun. You don't speak. That would be wasteful. You just watch. Here's the truth they don't teach in history books. Victorian coal was filthy. It wasn't the sleek, polished lumps you see in storybooks. It came in sacks, wet, dusty and full of sulphur. Touch it and your fingers turned black. Breathe it and your lungs never quite recovered. The poorer you were, the worse your coal. Cheap stuff left walls stained yellow, coated kettles in soot and made your tea taste like burnt eggs. You stir the pot on the grate. The water begins to tremble. Not boil, but tremble, like it's just as cold and miserable as you are. Your neighbour pulls out a hunk of bread. He tears it in two and hands you the larger piece. No butter, of course, just bread. It's rough, dry, and still carries the faint scent of last night's onions. But it's warm, if only because your hand is. You chew in silence. The coal snaps once. A spark darts out, dances on the stone hearth, then dies. You both lean in closer, eyes half closed, pretending the heat is spreading to your feet. The room begins to fill with smoke, not enough to cough, but enough to make your eyes sting. The flue's half blocked again. You'll have to clear it eventually, but not today. You glance at the corner where the walls meet. Damp streaks trail downward like teardrops. A strip of peeling wallpaper curls toward the hearth, catching the warmth like a child reaching for a blanket. Outside, the streets are still quiet, but you know it won't last. Soon, the city will creak awake. Chimneys roaring, boots stamping, carts rattling, horses snorting, and behind every door, someone else will be lighting their first fire, or trying to. There are rumours of shortages this year, rumours of price hikes. Some say the rail line is delayed by snow, and the coal yards near the docks are frozen shut. People whisper about the rich stockpiling sacks, buying by the ton while the poor line up for scraps. You once saw a fight break out in front of a coal vendor's cart. Two women, one with a baby strapped to her chest. The other had a sack already but tried to take more. It ended with a broken nose and the cart overturned. The coal spilled into the mud and froze there, half sunk, unreachable. Nobody helped. They just stared. And then, slowly, they began to dig. The image of those women scrambling through the frozen coal slop stays with you as you rise from the hearth. Your face is warm now, cheeks flushed from the fire, but your toes are still numb and your fingers throb with the dull ache that comes just before feeling returns. That's the cruel trick of it. Warmth hurts before it heals. You head outside with the empty coal scuttle tucked under your arm. The streets are louder now. Horses clip-clop by, steam rising from their nostrils like little factory stacks. The air's heavier, too, thicker. You cough once. It's involuntary, like an itch you can't scratch. Down by the corner is a small coal merchant stall, really just a cart with bags stacked high, each one sagging with black dust. A man with a wax moustache and leather gloves stands guard over it like it's a bank vault. You wait in the queue, 6 others ahead of you, all tight-lipped, all holding sacks, baskets or boxes. When it's your turn, he barely looks at you. "How much?" He grunts. You hold out a coin, a penny rubbed smooth from years in your pocket. He scoffs. That gets you sweepings. He means the dust, the black grit at the bottom of the sack. It won't burn well, it'll sputter and spit and stain everything it touches. But you nod anyway. He shovels a small heap into your scuttle like it's pig feed. You lug it home, your arm aching. Every bump in the road sends a puff of black dust into the air, coating your clothes. A woman in a bonnet glares at you when the wind shifts and a swirl of soot lands on her shawl. You mouth an apology, but she's already turned away. Back home you kneel by the hearth again. The fire's long gone cold. You sprinkle a handful of coal dust into the grate and try to coax it alive with a match. It fizzles, smokes, but doesn't catch. The dust isn't meant to burn. It's meant to mock. You think of those who can afford proper coal. Welsh anthracite, clean and hot, the kind that crackles sharp and gives off that golden orange glow. That's what the bankers burn. The merchants maybe. The mayor. They sit in plush parlours while their fires roar and servants bring them tea. You cough again, more from the thought than the smoke. Still, you try again. A twist of paper, a sliver of dry wood. Another match, this time it flickers long enough for the coal to smoulder. Not flame, but smoke, a thin blue coil. You shield it with your hands like it's a baby bird. Eventually it holds. Later that day, you walk past the back alley behind the bakery. You see 2 boys, thin, ragged, elbows like knots, sifting through an old sack of clinkers. Spent coal, the kind that's already been burned once and discarded. They scrape at it with spoons, hoping for solid chunks that didn't catch. You pause, then reach into your coat and offer them your last heel of bread. They look at it, then at you, then take it with quiet nods. They don't say thank you. They don't have to. You know what it's like to run out of fuel. By evening, your tiny fire is just embers, but it's enough to warm your soup. A few thin turnips float in murky broth, and you swear it tastes better than anything you've ever had. You cradle the bowl in your lap, letting the steam fog your lashes. Later still, you lie in bed, the room faintly warmer than this morning, though your breath still shows. You think about coal, not as fuel, but as currency, as power, as the line between warmth and misery. There's a story you heard once, maybe true, maybe not, about a man who painted lumps of stone black and sold them as coal to desperate families. They didn't realise the trick until hours passed and nothing caught fire. By then it was too late. No refunds, no heat. You wonder if he slept warm that night. You wake up again. That might not sound like much, but in this weather, waking up is a small triumph. Your blanket has slipped during the night, exposing part of your back to the air. And now your spine feels like it's been dunked in cold ink. You shiver hard, a full body twitch that makes your teeth clack. It's lighter now, thin daylight bleeding through the frosted window pane, the kind that never turns golden, only goes from grey to a paler, hungrier grey. You lift your hand to touch the glass. It's crusted, not on the outside, on the inside. The moisture from your own breath has frozen into a delicate net of ice, ferns curling like lace against the surface. You trace a finger through it, and the pattern melts into a smear. Your fingertip burns with cold. This is the third morning in a row that your water jug has frozen solid. You consider breaking it, just hurling the ceramic thing against the floor so it shatters and frees the useless block inside. But you can't afford another jug, so you leave it and pull your coat tighter. You shuffle toward the window and press your forehead against it, just for a moment. It's like pressing against a tombstone. The street below is already busy. You see a milk cart rattling past, the horse's hooves slipping slightly as it tries to keep balance. The driver wears fingerless gloves and has his hat pulled down over his ears. His moustache is frozen stiff, glittering with little flecks of frost. You go downstairs and see the bucket on the landing has split completely. Now a perfect vertical crack runs from rim to base. The ice inside has expanded overnight and broken it clean. This isn't rare. It happens all the time. London houses, especially the cheap ones, were not built for this level of cold. The insulation is a joke. Thin lath, cracked plaster and gaps that let the wind run free from room to room. Some say the wind has a name. You believe it. Downstairs, someone is already boiling water in a dented kettle, trying to thaw the clothesline. Yesterday's shirts are stiff, frozen in mid-sway. They look like ghosts trying to dance. You pull on your gloves and go outside. You've got laundry to do somehow. Or maybe you're heading to the workhouse washroom if they let you. There's a rumour that someone froze there last week, passed out after scrubbing floors, and nobody noticed until her rag stuck to her hand. You pass by a row of houses where icicles cling like fangs along every gutter. One snaps and crashes to the pavement beside you, sharp as a dagger, long as your forearm. You jump back just in time. Across the street, a child is licking a frozen rail. You want to yell at him, but before you can, his mother appears and yanks him away. There's a faint ripping sound as his tongue lets go. He wails. She shushes him, rubbing his mouth with the edge of her shawl. She's not angry, just tired. She's done this before. You know this feeling. Everything is sharp in winter. The air, the ice, the silence. Your boots are already soaked. The soles are splitting. You can feel the water squelching with every step. And the worst part, it's not even snowing anymore. It's just cold, deep cold, the kind that makes you forget what warmth ever felt like. You start to imagine things like steam rising from your own skin if someone dropped you into a hot bath, but you haven't had a bath in days. The frost creeps into everything. There are cracks in the water pump outside the bakery now. The baker is cursing under his breath while trying to thaw it with a kettle full of tea, his only hot liquid. He waves at you when he sees you looking and calls out, "Don't slip." You nod, but too late. Your heel catches on a patch of ice and suddenly the world tilts. You stumble forward, arms flailing, your basket of laundry tips, and a shirt falls into a slush puddle, instantly soaking up the dirty water like a sponge. You stand there for a second, heart pounding, half mortified, half furious. The baker says nothing, just watches you quietly as if to say, "That's winter." And it is. You wring out the shirt with numb fingers, but the slush clings. It's brown and gritty, laced with ash and something worse, maybe horse urine, maybe the residue of weeks-old street filth. Victorian snow, you're realising, isn't white. It's grey before it even hits the ground. You drape the shirt over your arm and keep walking. Every step makes your socks wetter. The wool rubs against your ankles like sandpaper. You glance down and notice your laces are beginning to fray. Just what you need. One more thing unravelling. You duck into a narrow alley to escape the wind. It cuts between buildings like a knife, whistling through tiny cracks in the bricks. A tangle of laundry lines overhead clinks with frozen clothespins. Bits of ice fall like tiny glass shards. Somewhere nearby, a cat yowls, then goes quiet. Even the animals have lost their voices to the cold. You reach the wash house at last. The line is already long. Women huddle near the entrance, steam rising faintly from their mouths as they whisper complaints. Someone stamps her feet, trying to keep blood flowing. Another adjusts a bundle under her coat, a baby maybe, or just cloth wrapped around her middle to fake a fuller figure and earn sympathy. You wait and wait and wait. By the time it's your turn, the air inside the washroom is thick with humidity and coal smoke. It's warmer, yes, but not comfortably so. It's the kind of heat that sticks to your face and makes your clothes feel damp before you even start. You drag your basket to one of the sinks, dip your hands into the soapy water, and flinch. Even here, even now, it's still cold. Just cold enough to hurt, not cold enough to freeze, which somehow is worse. You scrub. The shirt from the slush puddle is a lost cause, but you try anyway. You beat it against the side of the basin, and a spray of dirty water hits your cheek. You don't bother wiping it. You're already soaked. Your fingers redden, then they go white. Then they ache so badly you want to cry. You glance around and see the same face on every woman here. Lips pursed, brows tight, shoulders high and tense. Nobody speaks, nobody dares. There's no energy for small talk in this weather. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the metal tap, distorted, warped. Your nose is pink, your cheeks blotchy. You look older than you did a week ago. A month in this winter can take years off your face. At the far end of the room, a woman starts shouting. Her hands are frozen around a washboard, too cramped to let go. Two others rush to her side, trying to ease her fingers open. She weeps quietly, not with drama, just a soft, choked sound of pain that bubbles up and disappears into the steam. The attendant at the fire says nothing, just keeps poking at the brazier. You rinse your last piece of clothing and squeeze it out. It drips onto your skirt. You hang it with the others on a rack near the furnace, though you know they won't dry completely. Not here, not today. You step back out into the air and it hits you like a betrayal. The heat from the washroom was meagre, but it was something, and now it's gone. You hunch forward, arms wrapped around your ribs, and shuffle home with a wet bundle clinging to your chest. On the way, you pass a man scraping ice from his steps with a broken shovel. It's barely working, more slush than shovel, but he keeps at it. "Don't want another fall," he mutters. "Not like last year." You don't ask what happened last year, you don't want to know. Back home you hang the clothes near the fireplace, which is no longer lit. Just a few black crumbs in the grate, too scattered to catch. You lie down, still damp, still chilled, and above your head a single drop of melted frost falls from the ceiling beam and lands right on your forehead. You close your eyes, you don't even flinch. This time it's laundry day again, or maybe it isn't. Honestly, you've lost track. In the winter, time stretches like taffy. Slow, sticky, and strangely blank. The light never changes, the cold never lifts, and your body begins to live in cycles of thaw, freeze, ache, repeat. Today's priority is clothes, not washing them, wearing them. You start with your base layers, woolen stockings you darned 3 times already. The left one has a hole near the ankle which you cleverly rotate to the inside so it doesn't show. Over that goes a linen shift, stiff from drying by the fire too many times. The collar permanently scorched on one side, then a petticoat, then a second, then a blouse, then a bodice, then a skirt, then a shawl, then your coat. That's 10 layers, not counting undergarments. And still somehow, you're cold. You wrap your scarf 3 times around your neck and tuck the ends into your coat. But the chill slides down your collar anyway, like a thief who knows the hidden latch. You pull on gloves. They're more holes than wool now. The fingertips are gone, which is actually useful for sewing, but dreadful for survival. As you move about the room, you hear the faint rustle of newsprint. Yes, today's secret weapon is paper. Yesterday's newspaper, rolled and stuffed inside your blouse. Between layers, it crinkles with every step, like autumn leaves, but it works. It holds in heat better than a silk chemise ever could. A surprising number of people do this. Even Queen Victoria's own footmen were rumoured to stuff their breeches with the Times during long parades. But don't let the layers fool you. Dressing for winter in Victorian London isn't about style. It's a form of armour. You aren't putting on clothes. You're putting on defence mechanisms. Outside, you see a group of factory girls huddled at the corner. Each one is a patchwork of cloth and borrowed colour. Shawls pinned in place with bits of string. Coats with sleeves from 3 different donors. One girl wears a bonnet that clearly belonged to someone half her age. It sits high on her head like a teacup on a pumpkin. You join them because you're heading to the same place. The workshop, the laundry, the shop, wherever you're needed. Today everyone's moving stiffly, like dolls in a forgotten attic. All this cloth, all this wrapping, and yet your limbs still sting. Your joints throb when you bend. You keep moving because stopping means frostbite. You know that now. One girl beside you sneezes violently. It sends her off balance and nearly topples her into a snowbank. She laughs afterward like it's the funniest thing in the world. But you notice her eyes are rimmed red and her nose is leaking. She's sick, probably has been for a week. She's not staying home. Nobody can afford to. You pass a shop window with mannequins in corsets and winter capes. The mannequins have tiny waists, hourglass shapes, and smooth white porcelain skin that's never seen a coal fire. You tug your scarf tighter and look away. Clothing is a lie here. It doesn't make you beautiful, it makes you bearable. Without it, you'd freeze before midday. Your boots are stitched with waxed thread, they still leak. You know a trick, though. You line them with old rags dipped in beef tallow. Greasy, yes, but it blocks the water. And you stopped caring about smells a long time ago. A woman on your street once lined her boots with strips of rabbit fur sewn from a stolen muff. She said it kept her warmer than love ever did. You believe her. The wind shifts, and your skirt whips sideways, almost tripping you. You hold it down with one gloved hand and keep walking. The others laugh, but gently. Everyone has had that moment. You round the corner and spot a man in a top hat leaning against a lamppost, looking far too composed for the weather. His coat is tailored, his gloves intact, and his boots look freshly polished. But as you pass him, you hear the faintest crunch. Newspaper stuffed under that fine waistcoat. You smile to yourself. Even the posh ones play the same game. They just hide it better. You arrive at your place of work, a seamstress shop tucked between a tea merchant and a funeral director, and shake off the dusting of frost that's collected on your sleeves. It's not snowing exactly, more like the air itself is flaking apart. Inside, it's not much warmer than the street. The fire in the back has long since dwindled to embers, and nobody's dared to waste coal on a second spark. You rub your hands together, then flex your fingers to see which joints will obey you. Today, one knuckle pops with a painful crack. At least it moved. Around you the others are already settling in. You all move the same way, like swaddled birds, wrapped in so many layers you can hardly bend. Sewing in this state is an art form. You have to pin with sleeves rolled back because the fabric of your coat is too thick for delicate work. But take it off and you'll be shivering too hard to see straight. The paradox of winter clothing: too little and you freeze, too much and you can't function. You thread your needle and begin to work on a sleeve. A finely embroidered one, destined for someone who will never, ever have to stuff a bonnet with paper to keep their ears warm. The thread slips between your fingers, but your numb thumbs fumble the knot. You try again, then again. On the third attempt, you curse softly. The needle pricks your skin. A tiny bead of blood wells up. You suck it away and keep going. Around the room, the others are quiet, focused, or maybe just too cold to chat. One girl, maybe 16, leans close to her stitch work, her nose nearly touching the fabric. Her cheeks are pale, and her lips have that faint bluish tinge you've come to recognise. She's wearing mittens, with the fingertips cut out, probably her mother's, trimmed down to size. You remember a strange tidbit from last winter. Some seamstresses used to wear finger sleeves made from rabbit skin. Not gloves, just tiny fur tubes that slipped over the tips. Reusable, warm and soft enough to allow embroidery. You've never had any, but you think about them often. The forewoman stomps into the room, breath puffing like a dragon. No breaks until lunch, she snaps, then adds, "If you're cold, sew faster." Nobody responds. That would be pointless. You adjust your layers. The newspaper tucked inside your corset has slipped sideways, so now it's bunched against your ribs like a crumpled book page. You pull it back into place, discreetly. The ink has left a faint grey smudge on your shift. Outside, a gust rattles the windows. A flurry of snow skitters across the panes like moths against a candle. Someone hums a tune under their breath, something from a music hall. A brave, bright little thing about love and lanterns. The contrast makes you laugh softly through your nose. Your hands ache, your toes are damp, but the stitch work is coming along. Slowly. The garment you're making will probably be worn to a party with gas lamps and wine. Maybe someone will spill something on the cuff you hemmed and it'll never be noticed. By the time noon comes, your back aches, your fingers sting, and the shawl you wrapped around your legs has slipped away. You stretch once, carefully, then get up to stand by the window. You breathe on the glass and write a letter in the fog with your finger, just a silly one. Hello? Or maybe a heart. It vanishes almost instantly. Then the bell rings. Time for lunch. You all shuffle toward the back room, shoulders hunched, clutching parcels wrapped in cloth. Bread, maybe cheese, maybe just something warm to hold for 5 minutes. There's talk of a new girl who fainted yesterday from the cold. Nobody knows her name. She didn't come back today. As you sip lukewarm tea from a cracked mug, you can still hear the crinkle of newspaper beneath your blouse. It rustles when you breathe. It's a strange comfort, that sound. Like a page turning, as if your life might someday be written down. You step back onto the street after lunch, bellies half full, hands still stiff from holding tea mugs like lifelines. The wind greets you immediately, rude, sharp, and with that familiar tang of coal smoke and hoarse breath. It's stronger now than it was this morning, curling around your legs and pushing against your chest, as if trying to turn you back. But you don't go back. You have errands. You always do. You pull your coat tighter and begin to walk, head down, boots tapping unevenly against the paving stones. The rhythm is broken. One sole has come loose again, and it flaps a little with each step. You'll try to patch it with twine later, or maybe nail it back on with one of the extra sewing pins if you're feeling desperate. The streets aren't snow-covered, not like in fairy tales. Victorian London doesn't get clean white snow. It gets sludge, melted filth, blackened by soot and churned into something closer to stew than ice, clogs the gutters. It sucks at your boots and hides surprises underneath. Old rags, chicken bones, the occasional dead rat. You keep your eyes down, scanning for patches of ice. That's the real danger. It forms in the cracks where the morning's thawed slop refreezes by noon. The cobbles gleam in some places. Beautiful, glassy, and you know from experience that's where the worst falls happen. You cross through a market lane where vendors shout through scarves and steam rises from roasted chestnuts. Not enough to warm you, but enough to tease. One boy slips near a fruit cart and lands hard on his tailbone, letting out a squeal. His mother yanks him up by the collar and scolds him, more from fear than anger. You don't laugh. You've fallen too. Everyone has. You remember one winter when a man fell on Ludgate Hill right in front of a carriage? The driver swerved, but the wheel caught the man's leg. It shattered like kindling. They say he was carried off to St. Bart's, but everyone knew what that meant. Infection, amputation, and maybe, if he was lucky, life as a beggar with one good arm. That's what the ice does. It doesn't just hurt you, it changes you. You pass a constable who's stamping his feet and blowing on his hands. He nods to you, and you nod back. His moustache is rimmed with frost, and there's a red patch creeping up the side of his nose. He's got mittens made from a boiled wool blanket, cut and stitched at home, no doubt. Nobody escapes the cold. They just disguise it. A few steps later, your heel catches on a loose stone and your arms fly out. Instinctively, you regain your balance. Barely, but the jolt shoots up your spine and rattles your teeth. You pause, heart pounding, then glance around. Nobody noticed. You keep walking. A fishmonger on the corner throws a bucket of brine into the street. It splashes against the curb and a spray hits your skirt. The water's still warm, but it'll freeze soon. You don't complain. It's not worth it. You just lift your hem and keep going. You see a man with a wooden leg hobbling ahead of you. He taps the ground before each step, like he's probing for danger. Maybe he lost it to the war, maybe to a street fall. You don't ask. You just mirror his caution. And then, just when you think the path ahead looks clear, you hit it. A patch of black ice, smooth and perfectly blended with stone. Your foot skids forward. You gasp. You twist your torso trying to catch your balance, arms windmilling. And then, somehow miraculously, you stay upright. You don't move, not for a few seconds. You just stand there, one foot planted, one foot hovering over the enemy, and your breath clouding in front of your face like smoke. You made it this time. You press your hand to your chest, feel your heart pounding like a war drum beneath all the layers. That was close. One wrong angle, and you might have cracked a rib. Or worse, broken a wrist, which is as good as losing a month's work. Maybe more. You take a slow step forward, testing the cobbles like you're walking on glass, which, in a way, you are. The frost has made everything into a trap. What looked safe from a distance turns out to be pure hazard up close. Across the street, you see a pair of delivery boys hauling a cart. Maybe 12 or 13, red-faced and wheezing, their boots soaked to the ankles. The smaller one slips, nearly tipping the whole cart sideways. The older boy growls something, catches the handle just in time and smacks the other one on the ear. Not from cruelty, but panic. He's seen what happens when cargo is lost in this weather. A broken crate of glass or even a bruised apple shipment could cost them both a week's wages. You turn down a narrower lane, ducking between tall buildings where the sun never quite reaches. Here the ice doesn't melt. Not for weeks. The cold hangs between the walls, like a permanent ghost. You hear your footsteps echo as you walk. Crunch, crunch, squelch, crunch. And then suddenly, silence. You've stepped onto a patch of fully frozen stone, smooth as slate. For a second it's almost beautiful. This secret alley, tucked away and silvered with frost, like something from a fairy tale. Then a shape stirs ahead. It's a man huddled beneath a threadbare coat, back against the bricks. You see his breath rising in short bursts. His fingers are bare. He's not begging, just sitting. His eyes are half closed, and for one awful second you wonder if he's still breathing. You edge closer. 1 step. 2. Then his head lolls, and he lets out a snore so wet and rattling it almost makes you smile. He's alive. Not well, but alive. You leave a crust of bread beside him and move on quietly. You don't wake people in that condition unless you have to. The shock might kill them faster than the cold. A little further along, your path crosses a delivery man dozing in his handcart, insulated by sacks of flour against the draught. He is trying to sleep off the chill. One of the flour bags has ripped open, leaving a powdery film dusting his boots like fresh snow. You suspect the cold has rendered him numb to the sensation. Now, as you approach the main avenue again, the full scope of the winter city opens up. Horses pull carts, steam rising from their bodies, and every chimney in sight releases a column of smoke. Coal wagons rattle down the street, their progress marked by dark dust trails resembling dropped crumbs. People hurry along, gazes fixed on the ground, collars turned up, skirts slightly lifted from the wet slush. A man wearing a derby yells an observation across the street. A woman loses her footing but manages to grab a lamppost to steady herself. A boy without mittens jumps from one foot to the other next to a newspaper stand. It appears as though the entire city is engaged in a kind of dance. It is not a dance of pleasure, but one of necessity for survival. Each motion, every stride, the smallest shrug of a shoulder or raising of a skirt, is a calculation to fend off the severe cold. You notice a group of street sweepers scraping frozen grime from the curb. The sound of their bodies and brooms makes a grinding noise on the icy surface. One of them is remarkably barefoot. His feet are bound in strips of cloth, but you can see the bruised, exposed skin underneath. You wonder how he manages to remain upright. You recall a story, perhaps apocryphal, about a man in winter who fastened thick wooden soles to his boots with nails to lift himself above the slop. He crafted them himself and referred to them as clompers. People first ridiculed the idea, then they began to imitate him. The rhythmic impact of those clompers on the cobblestones became a distinctive winter sound. You briefly consider making a pair for your own use. For now, you continue walking, your steps becoming slower and more deliberate. You have learned to exercise caution. The wind presses at your back as the street narrows again. Soon, the real fog will arrive, the kind that conceals everything, not just immediate danger. But you'll get there. You have successfully navigated another journey through the frozen arteries of the city, and your toes are still attached. You sense it before it becomes visible. The air thickens, not only with cold, but with a denser element. Something heavier, grittier, as if the city's exhalation has turned inward. It clings to your throat, your eyelashes, even the seams of your gloves. This is not snow. It isn't exactly fog either. It is London fog, the unique kind that only winter can conjure. It is saturated with coal smoke, factory fumes, soot from chimneys, and just enough dampness to bind it all together, like airborne asphalt. The sort of fog that crawls through the alleys like a living entity, devouring visible shapes, faces, and sounds. One moment you are looking down the road at a man using a cane, and the next he has completely disappeared. They call this phenomenon a pea souper, and the name is apt. Its colour is not white or grey. It is yellow, often tinged with green, sometimes a sickly shade, like ancient, spoiled soup. You enter it and the light vanishes. It doesn't dim, it truly disappears. The sun above becomes a mere smudge, a vague patch of illumination, like a candle shielded by a curtain. And then the silence begins, or more accurately, the ambient noises don't cease. They are transformed. Carriage wheels grinding on snow now sound like velvet being brushed. People's voices are flattened, absorbed by the air. Footsteps are reduced to whispers. You can hear the sound of your own breathing echo in your ears. You reach out instinctively, trying to feel your way ahead. Your outstretched fingers disappear from view just 2 inches from your face. This is unlike any fog you have encountered. This is near blindness. A moving, palpable haze. Fog that carries the odour of sulphur and bitter tar, and another scent you cannot quite identify. Something metallic and sour, like rainwater in a corroded bucket. You pull your scarf tighter over your face and blink away the tears that sting your eyes. Everyone does this. The fog irritates your eyes like an abrasive powder. Ahead, you hear a sharp shout, followed by the clatter of horse hooves. You flatten yourself against a wall, narrowly avoiding a hansom cab that barrels past, its driver barely visible behind the reins, navigating by ingrained habit, not vision. You recall the saying about old London cabbies. They do not require maps, they simply follow the sound of the gas lamps and rely on luck. You proceed slowly, maintaining contact with the brick wall beside you. It is damp, not from water, but from condensed soot in the atmosphere. If you were to lean your cheek against it, you would pull away looking like a chimney sweep. A woman materializes from the fog, nearly colliding with you. She gasps in surprise, clutching her package more tightly. You offer a quick nod, but she has already dissolved back into the haze. The street has become a passageway of shifting shadows. Nothing remains visible for more than a few paces. This is why people carry lanterns in this weather. Some individuals even wear small glass visors resembling theatrical masks to protect their eyes from the soot. You once saw a banker wearing one, striding through the fog in shiny boots, the visor attached to his top hat like a miner's gear. It appeared foolish, yet it also seemed practical for warmth. You cough again, a deep, rattling sound in your chest. The fog does more than just sting. It settles in your lungs, your clothing, and deep in your bones. You understand its danger, as does everyone, but it is typically discussed merely as an inconvenience. Last week, you heard a rumour about a dock worker found slumped next to a crate, his mouth agape, lips stained black. They claim he did not succumb to freezing, but suffocated. The fog allegedly filled his lungs like wet concrete, stopping his breath mid-snore. You hope it's only a morbid story, but it feels too real. You proceed cautiously now, relying only on memory, past the butcher shop, past the bookstore, past the bakery whose window is darkened by soot from inside. Then, as if by a miracle, you see it. A gas lamp flickering in the gloom, a faint orange, unsteady light, a tiny spot of warmth in the swirling green-yellow air. You move toward it like a pilgrim approaching a sanctuary and stand beneath it, breathing deeply, pretending the air is cleaner there. It is not, but you indulge the pretense. The gas lamp sputters above you, casting a gentle halo that barely pushes back the fog, but it provides a focus. You linger there for a while, allowing your eyes to rest in the light, wishing it were sufficient to warm your skin. It is not, of course. If anything, it highlights the extreme cold, how the fog steals heat like a midnight burglar. You survey your surroundings, though there is little to perceive. The lamp illuminates only a few feet of pavement in every direction, like a spotlight on a stage with the other performers hidden in the smoke. You feel like the last living person in the world. Then, footsteps. Slow and irregular. A figure emerges, barely discernible from the wall of yellow mist. An elderly man, bundled in an oilskin coat, his face wrapped so tightly in scarves that only his eyes are visible. He offers you a brief nod, steps into your small circle of light, and without a word, ignites his pipe using the gas jet itself. The sudden flare causes both of you to recoil slightly. The brief light illuminates his face. Soot clings to the wrinkles like war paint. He takes a draw from the pipe, nods again, and recedes back into the darkness. This is the pattern of life in the fog. Appear, vanish, repeat. You continue walking, your eyes partially closed against the stinging air. The soot adheres to your eyelashes, lips, and teeth. When you trace your tongue along the roof of your mouth, it feels gritty. It is like breathing through a thick wool blanket soaked in something acidic. That is the coal. Always the coal. During the harshest winters, Londoners burned nearly anything to generate heat. Low-grade coal, tar, timber, even compressed animal waste. The consequence is fog like this, a living smog so dense it can eclipse the sun at midday. There were times when city bells had to ring every hour to enable people to navigate by sound alone. You pass a doorway where someone is huddled in the recess, covered by a blanket that is little more than a coarse rug. Their face is hidden, but the rhythmic rise and fall of the cloth indicates they are still alive. You consider rousing them, urging them to find shelter, to move on. But where could they go? The fog is indifferent to where you lie. It infiltrates just the same. Further along the road you hear coughing. Not a single voice, but a chorus. It is coming from a workhouse, perhaps a schoolroom. It is difficult to distinguish the source. The sound is muted, but it carries, wet, wrenching, persistent, bronchitis, pneumonia, the slow decay of the lungs. Call it what you will, the fog eventually finds its way into everyone. Eventually, you finally reach the turn for your street and feel your way along the familiar railings, your fingers brushing against the cold iron. Each gate is a milestone. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one has a missing post, which you use as your indicator. Turn right. Your front steps are invisible until your toe bumps the first one. You stumble, steady yourself against the wall, and fumble for the doorknob. It is slick with frost and caked with soot. You twist it. Inside, the conditions are only marginally better. The darkness follows you indoors. You light a candle with unsteady hands, and the small flame dances with shadows as thick as the smog outside. You shut the door firmly. The air remains smoky. The windows do not seal correctly, allowing the smog to seep in through every imperfection. You could try stuffing the gaps with rags, but the rags are still damp from the fog of the day before. It is a futile effort. You sit near the hearth, although there is no fire, only the lingering memory of warmth. Your clothing carries the odour of London's inner workings, charred, sour, metallic. You remove your gloves and look at your fingers. The tips are grey, not from frostbite, but from accumulated soot. You blink, and even that causes your eyes to water. You are not crying, it is simply the air. The morning following a dense fog feels like recovering from a fever. The air is slightly clearer now, but far from clean. It has a stale, heavy quality, like a chamber where too many people have been breathing for too long. Outside, the streets shine, but not with morning dew. That sheen is the residue of soot that settled overnight, smeared across every surface like the greasy signature of winter itself. You step out into this post-fog world, and it feels almost worse than the storm itself. Everything is unnervingly quiet. Not the gentle silence of snow. Snow blankets the world with a sense of peace. This silence is sharp and brittle, as if the city is holding its breath. There is no birdsong, no clatter of hooves, just the faint, distant grinding of a cartwheel and the steady drip of thawing frost from a rooftop above. You head toward the Thames, unsure of your purpose, perhaps because it is familiar, perhaps because it is the only place where the city feels expansive in winter, less suffocating, less confined by the bricks and smoke. The side streets along the route are encrusted with frost, windows are edged with lacework ice, and doorsteps are treacherous. Someone has already fallen this morning. You can clearly see the scuffed trail in the slush where a boot slid, followed by a crumpled smear where a knee must have hit the ground. No blood, thankfully, not this time. At the riverbank, the view opens up and is startling. The Thames is not flowing normally. It moves sluggishly like thick syrup, dark and black beneath a thin layer of forming ice. Large, solid slabs of ice drift slowly by, cracking sheets bordered in white, bumping against each other with heavy muffled thuds. The fog still lingers over the water, clinging low like a reluctant drunk refusing to leave a tavern. You stand at the railing, gazing down at this massive, groaning artery of the city. Occasionally, every few winters, the river freezes. Not completely, not across its entire width, but enough to alarm the boatmen, enough to stop barge traffic, enough to start people whispering about another frost fair. You have heard the tales of those bizarre, spectacular moments in London's past when the river froze solid and entire festivals were erected on the ice. Market stalls, puppet shows, even bowling on the ice. They claim an ox was roasted whole on the frozen Thames once, and commemorative pamphlets were printed right on the ice itself, but that was many years ago. The river, they say, no longer freezes like that. Still you observe a few brave young boys testing the edges near the shallow bank, skipping stones across the surface. One dares to step out just a foot, and his friends yell in anticipation. He laughs. You watch, half afraid, half admiring. He jumps back just before the ice can crack. A sensible boy. You turn toward the fishmonger's stall near the bridge, where the air smells less of the river and more of old rope and dried seaweed. His goods are partially frozen, displayed on the thick slabs of snow-packed wood. Cod, eels, and something unidentifiable with its mouth still gaping in surprise. "Be careful walking home with those," he tells a customer, handing over a wrapped parcel. "Leave them outside too long, and they'll turn hard as stone." He is not exaggerating. You once saw a woman purchase herring, forget it on her doorstep, and find it the next morning frozen right onto the wrapping paper, completely solid, unusable, and destined for the fire instead of the frying pan. You pause to warm your hands by the fishmonger's brazier. He feeds it splinters of discarded packing crates, and the smell is like burning adhesive. But the heat is genuine and your fingers relax slightly. A man next to you comments, "The Thames will freeze solid this year, mark my words." You glance sideways. His face is pockmarked and wind-chapped. He is wearing 3 scarves but no gloves. "Like in 47, he adds. You do not remember 1847, but you nod anyway. Sometimes it is best to allow the city's old ghosts to speak. They have earned the right. You leave the warmth of the brazier reluctantly, your fingers still tingling from the sudden rush of heat. As you step away, the cold immediately reclaims your skin as if it had been patiently waiting. The Thames is still there, sluggish and black, slapping sheets of ice against the embankments with a weary resignation, and the wind is stronger now. Not a sudden gust, just a steady pressure, like breath on the back of your neck, persistent and unkind. You pull your scarf up higher and trudge along the river walk, watching as the fog recedes just enough to reveal the huddled shapes of boats, moored and motionless. Their sails are tightly furled and their decks are dusted with snow, abandoned like cold spectres. You wonder how many of the families who live on those boats are currently burning their own furniture for warmth this week. You have heard of it happening. First, the fuel wood runs out, then the crates, then the internal shelves. Then, when no one is watching, the chairs. One boy on a moored barge is struggling to pry a railing post loose with a crowbar. His father watches from an open hatch with vacant eyes. He does not intervene. The wind carries the sharp scent of river mud mixed with something more foul. Sewage, most likely. The Thames does not cease to be a sewer simply because the temperature drops. It just masks the smell more effectively when it freezes. You leave the river path and enter a narrow side street, hoping to take a shortcut toward your home. But the ground here is more treacherous, the uneven stone paving stones made slick by refrozen slush. A mound of horse manure sits frozen solid, a grotesque sculpture, rigid and sparkling with frost. You pass a woman attempting to sweep her front steps without much success. Her broom is stiff with ice and beginning to crack in places. Yet she persists, brushing half-heartedly at the crusted layer, as if the physical act alone might generate warmth. "Morning," she mumbles, without raising her head. You nod and continue on your way. After a few steps, you look back and see she has paused, just standing there, one hand still on the broom, the other pressed against her lower back. Her shoulders slump under the quiet oppression of winter, that slow, persistent kind of burden that is not dramatic but simply unyielding. Further down, A man pushing a wheelbarrow, overflowing with coal, scurries past, the cart squealing as if in distress. You step aside to let him hurry by. His scarf slips as he rushes, and you see the raw, flaking red chapping along his exposed throat. He does not stop to adjust it, simply barrels onward as if the cold itself is in pursuit. You know that feeling well. Near the corner, a rag and bone man rings his familiar bell. "Old boots, tin, rags," he calls out, his voice hoarse but surprisingly upbeat. You almost manage a smile. The way he trudges, encased in a patchwork of coats and scraps, makes him look like a walk-in closet. He nods as you pass. "Watch your step there, love," he cautions. Too late. Your heel slides ever so slightly on a patch of unseen ice. You do not fall, but it is a near thing. The shock travels up your leg like an electric current. You grit your teeth and continue walking. You arrive at the steps of your building, already slick again despite the ashes you scattered yesterday. The small bucket of grit you used has made little difference. You stop to forcefully knock the frozen slush from your soles and catch your breath. Then, something unexpected. A bird call. A small sound, thin and uncertain, but undeniably real. A blackbird is perched on a bent wire above the street, its tail feathers twitching in the wind. You stop and gaze up. The bird tilts its head, lets out another hesitant note, then hops sideways as if doubting its own optimism. It feels like an act of defiance. You let the sound linger in your ears for a moment, before pushing open the door and stepping inside. The cold follows you. It always does. The kitchen is dark, damp, and carries the smells of coal dust and boiled cabbage. You hang your coat near the hearth, not because it is wet, but because that is the only place it might eventually dry. The fabric is rigid with frost at the hem, and as it begins to thaw, it sags under its own weight. You do not bother to remove your boots. The soles are so saturated they have fused to your socks. It is better to keep the trapped heat where it is, while it lasts. You head toward the pantry to determine what to eat, or more accurately, what remains edible. Winter does more than just chill the body. It performs strange acts on stored food. You open a wooden cupboard and are met by a familiar scent. Mildew, starch, and that slightly sour undertone that signifies something has gone bad, but you will eat it regardless. On the shelf is a sack of potatoes, or what remains of one. You reach inside, and your fingers close around something completely solid. Too solid. You pull out a potato, frozen through, its skin black and waxy, its texture hard as a rock. When you drop it on the counter, it makes a dull thud, like a paperweight. Another one is cracked open, frozen from the inside out, its flesh crumbling like chalk, useless, potentially toxic. You once heard that in exceptionally bad years, desperate cooks would boil frozen potatoes until they were soft enough to mash, then mix them with flour and fry them into flat cakes. You attempted this once. The result tasted like hot mud and regret. You move on. There is a cabbage on the table, its outer leaves yellowed and shriveled. When you peel one back, it releases an odour of wet wool and vinegar. Not rotten, just aged. You look at the loaf of bread you purchased 3 days ago. It is sitting near the window, your mistake, and is now a solid block of what was once edible masonry. You tap it with your knuckle. Solid. You attempt to slice it, and the knife blade flexes. You attempt to break it, and it nearly breaks your hand. You sigh and retrieve a hammer from beneath the sink. Crack. A corner piece shatters off. You nibble at it tentatively, like a mouse, careful not to chip a tooth. It carries a faint flavour of flour and coal smoke. You are fortunate, in a way. There is still something left in the pantry. You have heard of families scraping mould off spoiled meat or cooking with lard so old it smells like candle wax. One woman boiled shoe leather to make a dinner. Another made soup from onion skins and hot water, serving it with a spoonful of salt and a false promise that it would build character. Your neighbour once told you she tried to make porridge using sawdust mixed with oat husks. It was technically successful, she admitted, provided you did not mind splinters in your gums. You cut a chunk of the cabbage and drop it into the pot with a bit of onion, a few carrot shavings, and a thin sliver of beef sweat, saved from a week ago. You light the burner, it flickers, then catches fire. The resulting smell is less like soup and more like sheer survival, but the heat rising from the pot feels like a spark of hope. You sit beside it and watch the water begin to swirl. You imagine Victorian kitchens in wealthy homes where cooks worked over enormous iron ranges, pouring thick gravy onto roast joints and baking pies with half a dozen different spices. You picture the steam rising from tureens, the golden crust of a game pie breaking under a silver spoon. Then you look down at your pot of cabbage water and the illusion dissipates like breath on a window pane. Still, you stir the pot, because even poor soup is better than no soup at all. You ladle the cabbage broth into a chipped bowl. It is thin, so transparent you can see the bottom of the bowl through it, but it is hot and it smells vaguely of onion. You cup the bowl between your palms like a sacred object, holding it close to your chest to absorb whatever heat it can spare. You take a sip. The flavour is dull, mostly salt and steam, with a note of bitterness from the cabbage. You chew a carrot shaving, and it crunches softly, a small act of resistance against the uniform mush of everything else. You eat slowly, savouring each spoonful, not because it is delicious, but because there are so few of them. The bowl provides welcome warmth to your hands. Your face begins to tingle where the heat touches it. It is the sort of meal that does not quite satisfy your hunger, but it manages to distract your stomach long enough to make a difference. You glance over at the remnants of the bread you hammered earlier. You consider toasting it over the flame, but the last time you attempted that, it caught fire instantly and almost set the curtain ablaze. You decide instead to soak it in the soup. It softens reluctantly, like a brick left out in the rain. Nevertheless, you eat it. As you do, a memory surfaces of a dinner 2 winters ago, when your neighbour served boiled swede and turnip mash with mustard seeds and boldly declared it a banquet. You recall laughing then. It felt extravagant at the time, a holiday treat. The memory causes your mouth to curve upward slightly. Even now, outside, the light is diminishing again. It is not yet 4 o'clock, but the sun is already withdrawing, surrendering to the long blue twilight that makes everything appear submerged underwater. You squint through the window and see frost beginning to spread along the edges of the pane again, etching delicate patterns like feathers or frozen seaweed. You wonder idly if anyone has ever tried to give names to those shapes. You clean your bowl with a small crust of bread, wiping it dry with the last bite. No drop of sustenance is wasted. You stack it in the sink, which is full of yesterday's unwashed dishes, all frozen solid. You tap a spoon against the edge of a cup and hear the clear, sharp chime of ice. You wrap your shawl tighter and settle into the chair by the hearth. There is no fire, only recollection. But you sit there regardless, because it is your routine after eating, and routine provides comfort, even in the cold. You pull the newspaper from where it was tucked beneath your blouse. It is now thoroughly wrinkled and warm from your body heat, and smooth it out on your lap to read. The ink has smeared in places. Some of the words are illegible. The news itself is days old anyway. Something about a train derailment in Leeds, a minor scandal involving a bishop, Parliament arguing again over the cost of flour. But you read every word slowly because it gives your eyes something to focus on while your body begins the slow nightly process of turning back into a block of ice. There is a sound from the floor above, perhaps pipes groaning or someone dragging a chair across the floor. The walls creak with the natural expansion and contraction of old winter-bound wood. This building is old, older than you are, older than any of the furnishings inside. It has endured 100 winters. It understands the rhythm of the season. You press your cheek into your palm and exhale a long, slow breath. The room fogs briefly. The candle on the table burns low and leans slightly in the draught. And then comes the sudden clear realization. Your soup, the one made with the shriveled cabbage and old onion, will be the finest thing you consume this week. Perhaps next week as well. Not because it is particularly good, but simply because it is hot. And in a winter this severe, that is everything. Morning arrives without ceremony. No rooster crowing, no golden sunrise filtering through the curtains. Just the heavy groan of floorboards as someone on the floor below moves around in the dim light and the scrape of a chair leg being dragged across cold wood. You force your eyes open, but the room looks exactly as it did when you finally fell asleep. Dim, grey, still, as if time itself forgot to progress. You remain lying there for another minute, taking an inventory of your body. Your fingers feel rigid, your toes ache, and your neck is stiff from sleeping curled up like a snail beneath every blanket you possess. You stretch cautiously, trying not to awaken the pain in your joints. You hear the coughing again. It echoes through the shared walls. It is not a dry cough, either. It is the thick, chesty kind, deep and resonant. Someone has caught the winter illness, and it has settled in permanently. You try not to dwell on it. Everyone is coughing. It is virtually a constant background noise, like the steady ticking of a clock. You sit up and rub your arms briskly. The air bites instantly. You pull your clothing on over your nightdress without changing. It is simply too cold to fully undress. Today's labour will be strenuous, and you will need every single layer you can manage. The other residents are beginning to stir now. In the kitchen, someone has already boiled water, or at least managed to warm it, and the aroma of porridge rises up the stairwell. Thin stuff, you know that smell well. Oats, water, maybe a whisper of salt if the cook was generous. Perhaps someone managed to save a small dollop of treacle. But you are not thinking about breakfast. You are thinking about work. Because today you have a shift at the laundry house, a place where heat and steam and sheer effort battle the cold and sometimes emerge victorious. It is one of the rare places in London where people willingly subject themselves to being scalded, blistered, and soaked. Why? Because at least you are not actively freezing. You tightly wrap a scarf around your head, pulling it low over your ears, and step outside. The sky is bruised with the first signs of light, but the streets are already alive with noise. Wagon wheels grind over half-frozen slush. A fish vendor shouts prices that are clearly beyond anyone's means. A butcher opens his shop shutters with a loud groan and a whispered curse. The ache in your feet starts as a prickling sensation while you walk. It isn't exactly the cold, but the rush of life returning to them, the circulation resuming as you move, and the resulting sharp burn. You briefly recoil and hasten your steps. Reaching the laundry house, the entrance resists momentarily as you push it inward. The air inside envelops you instantly. Dense, wet, hot vapour surges forward in thick plumes, carrying the potent scent of soap, scorched linen, and saturated wool. It's intense, yet comforting in its warmth. You pause, allowing the heat to penetrate your sleeves, the woven fibres of your shawl, and the tips of your ears. Then a sharp voice shouts a reminder of your lateness. You shake your head, step across the threshold, and find your designated spot. The room is a din of constantly dripping fabric, concealed hissing pipes and splashing tubs. Women strain to drag loads of material into massive vats of almost boiling liquid, stirring the contents with extended wooden paddles. Others struggle to squeeze them dry over iron buckets, their arms trembling from the exertion. Everything is slick, every floorboard is treacherous. You recall a girl who slipped just last week, scalding her hands so severely she was forced to quit. You plunge your forearms into the nearest tub. The water's heat sears through the worn holes in your gloves. You let out a small, sharp sound, but you don't withdraw. The pain signifies warmth. You rotate the laundry and watch the soap suds surface, shimmering like small ethereal forms in the hazy air. Sweat rapidly collects on your brow, traces a path down your temple, and vanishes under your collar. It feels almost like an indulgence. The longer you remain in the laundry house, the more the steam seems to permeate your very structure. Your hair is plastered to your head, your sleeves sag with moisture, and your fingers are ghostly pale and wrinkled, resembling boiled cloth themselves. But this is the first time in days you've genuinely sweated, and there's a strange sense of privilege in it. You switch from the paddle to the mangle, an enormous cast-iron machine with 2 rollers that's the thickness of stovepipes. You feed the wet items through it, one by one, forcefully turning the crank until they are flattened and mostly moisture-free. The wringer fights you with every rotation, whining and groaning as if it, too, is weary of this winter. The handle digs painfully into your palm. You change hands again and again. A woman beside you is humming quietly, a simple repeated melody, a steady tempo for the labour. You don't recognise the song, but the beat aligns with your work. You find yourself joining in softly. Another woman nearby adds her voice, rough from coal smoke and years of yelling over the industrial noise. It's not a joyful sound, but it offers a measure of relief. You look up and see the lines of wet clothing suspended overhead, releasing moisture like 100 miniature storms. Shirts, undergarments, sheets, delicate lace collars, all gently steaming in the surrounding fog. Someone has even hung their own mittens up there, hoping the heat will dry them before the midday break. You regret not thinking of it yourself. Near one of the vats, a woman suddenly lets a cloth drop and slumps onto the stool behind her, gasping for air. Her hands are fiercely, alarmingly red. A supervisor quickly approaches, grimaces, and wraps her fingers in a towel. "You have to introduce them slower," she murmurs. "You throw frozen hands into boiling water, they'll fracture like eggshells." The woman nods, without tears, simply clutching her hands tightly and inhaling through her teeth. You return to the mangle. Press, crank, press, crank. When your arms can no longer manage the weight, you shift to folding, quick, precise movements, creating crisp corners, stacking the clothes into neat piles for collection. Your fingers leave damp marks on the fabric, which will disappear before delivery. You handle someone's nightshirt made of fine, soft cotton embroidered with initials. You imagine the owner, the type of bed they sleep in, whether their home is warm enough to keep water from freezing overnight. If their hearth ever goes cold, probably not. A small detail comes to mind. One of the older women once told you that wealthy people used to dispatch their laundry in locked containers just to stop the maids from stealing their expensive undergarments, as if the poor desired someone else's bloomers. You dismiss the notion with a quiet scoff and snap the shirt to smooth it out. At noon, a whistle sounds and you all take seats on benches against the wall, the steam still clinging to your shoulders like a second layer of clothing. A shared tin of weak, bitter but hot tea is passed around and you take slow sips. Your throat is grateful. The conversation is minimal, fatigued. Someone mentions their child is unwell. Another complains her roof is leaking again. You listen, nodding, but contribute little. You are conserving strength. After the break, you'll return to the tubs and the water won't feel quite as welcoming the second time around. You rotate your shoulders, stretch your back, and examine your sleeves. They are saturated, as are your skirts. Your socks squelch whenever you move on the bench. You understand that the moment you step outside, all of this dampness, this temporary warmth, will turn against you. Your clothes will freeze into rigid layers, your wet boots will stiffen, and the perspiration on your skin will turn to ice. But you also recognise this. For a few hours, you were not cold. You were worn out. You were blistered. You were soaking, but not chilled. And in a Victorian winter, that counts as triumph. You open the outer door and the cold assaults you like a forgotten memory. Everything your body had temporarily suspended, how to tighten up, how to shiver, how to throb, returns instantly. The wet wool of your skirt begins to freeze before you even reach the first corner. The material stiffens with each step, forming strange ridges like the pleats of a curtain left out all night. Your boots, soaked through by the laundry vapour, also start to harden. With every stride, the soles hit the street with the sound of frozen meat slapped onto a butcher's block. You curl your toes inside, desperately trying to maintain blood flow. It barely works. It's getting darker now, you notice. It's not truly late, but the sun disappears early in winter, sinking behind the chimney stacks. By mid-afternoon, the gas lamps begin to ignite one by one, forming halos in the swirling mist. Some hiss and sputter as if protesting the task. Others glow steadily, casting elongated, unsteady shadows across the uneven cobblestones. You walk past a series of basement windows. Each one reveals a distinct narrative. Behind one pane, a family is gathered around a meagre fire, two children leaning toward the heat, their small hands extended like flowers toward the light. In another, a seamstress toils under a single gas jet, her back bent, her face taut with concentration. In a third, there is only an unoccupied chair and a heel of bread left on a plate. You pull your shawl tighter around yourself. The street narrows as you proceed into the older district of town. This is where the renters live. Not the comfortable ones, but the others, the kind of places people occupy because they have no other recourse. Below street level, damp, lightless, cold as burial plots. You know someone who resides in one of these. Her name is Nora. She used to work the mangle next to you. Then her hands gave out, the joints swelled, the skin cracked, and every turn of the crank sent pain shooting up her arms like an electrical current. The physician called it rheumatism. Nora simply called it winter. Now she sells matches on the corner, sitting on a crate, her knees pressed together, her lips purple, her fingernails darkened. She can no longer strike the matches herself. She simply holds the bundle and waits for someone's pity. You stop at her corner. She's there, barely visible in the deepening twilight, wrapped in a coat, assembled from 3 different garments, patches of brown, grey, and a faded red. She sees you and raises a shaking hand. "Cold one," she rasps. You nod. "Here," you say, reaching into your pocket and offering her the piece of bread you saved from lunch. She accepts it as though it were a gem. "Thank you, dear." You offer to walk her home, but she declines. "Not yet. The men from the print house come by after nightfall. Sometimes they buy 2 bundles. You understand the implication. They buy the matches not out of necessity, but because they are warm from the pub and feeling charitable or perhaps remorseful. You don't press her. You simply leave the other half of your cabbage roll on the crate next to her and continue on. As you walk, the aroma of roasting meat catches your attention. It's coming from a nearby shop, one of the newer establishments with internal gas lighting and a brass bell on the entrance. A roast is turning slowly in the window, glossy and golden. You pause just long enough to watch it spin. A child stands next to you, his eyes wide, his lips slightly open. He looks about 6, wearing a jacket much too large and boots too small. You glance down, his fingers are tucked into his sleeves, his cheeks are chapped. You look back at the meat, then at the boy. Then you walk away. There is nothing you can do tonight. You turn down a thin alley, the kind that perpetually smells faintly of wet stone and boiled onions. The streetlights don't extend this far, so you navigate mostly by instinct, counting steps, tracing your fingers along the brickwork, listening for the familiar groan of the iron gate that marks the rear of your building. A distant shout echoes somewhere behind you, followed by drunken laughter. You lower your head and increase your pace, not necessarily because they are dangerous, but because they are warm and you are not, and that difference makes people unpredictable. Someone full of gin and roast pork cannot imagine the cold creeping up your spine right now like a set of frigid fingers. You find the gate and push it open with your hip. It resists, the hinges stiff with frost, but finally grinds aside. You step into the shared courtyard. It's nothing more than a patch of hard-packed dirt and broken flagstones surrounded by the backs of row houses, with clotheslines zigzagging overhead like spiderwebs. You head for the cellar door, tucked beneath the staircase. Your feet crunch over salt someone scattered earlier. Too little, too late. A patch of ice is waiting just beneath it. You don't fall this time, but your boot skids slightly and your knee is jarred. You catch your breath and inhale through clenched teeth. That ache will stay with you through the night. The cellar door opens into a room you can just barely stand upright in. You duck instinctively. The ceiling here is low. The beams are thick and darkened with age. You've hit your head on them often enough to remember. Inside it smells of damp clay, soot and sleep. There are 3 simple mattresses on the floor. One is yours. You know it by the faint depression in the straw ticking and the way the blanket is moulded into a shape vaguely resembling your body. You kneel beside it and begin to take off your layers, slowly, meticulously, as if peeling back the day itself. Scarf, coat, shawl, skirt. You fold each item and place it next to your bed, though you know by morning they will be as cold as stone again. Your fingers are crimson. Your breath fogs like smoke as you exhale. You sit on the mattress, and then you perform a very characteristic, very practical act, learned through necessity. You pull your knees up to your chest, wrap your arms around your shins, and wait for your own body to generate warmth. Movement helps. Tension retains the heat. Stillness is a luxury for those with working fireplaces. Your roommate stirs at the far end. She doesn't speak, just coughs into her sleeve and turns over. You hear the straw rustle beneath her. It sounds like footsteps in snow. Then the drip. Always the drip. Somewhere near the opposite wall, a slow leak from the pipes overhead falls with a steady rhythm into a tin cup left there to collect it. Plink, plink, plink. One of you will empty it in the morning, or perhaps not. If it overflows, it simply soaks into the floor and turns to frost by daylight. You lie down, cocooning yourself in your blanket, your shirt, and your resolve. Then you feel it. A subtle scraping sound, not rapid, just a soft disturbance near the corner. You don't look. You already know it's a rat. Maybe 2. They leave you alone, provided you leave them alone. You've even named one of them, Jaws, after a particularly self-satisfied landlord you once had. He only appears on nights when the temperature drops below freezing. Tonight, apparently, is one of those nights. You shift, pulling the blanket more tightly, tucking it under your chin and over your ears. You close your eyes. You listen. Plink, plink. The rats cease their movement. Even they require sleep. And just as you begin to drift off, your body spent, the cold finally dulled, one final sound joins the room. The cough from the girl in the corner. Deep, slow, followed by silence. No one speaks. That cough is all too familiar. You'll check on her in the morning. You always do. You wake before the sun, if it rises fully these days. The cellar is silent now, save for the occasional shifting of straw and the constant, relentless drip. You lie still for a moment, staring into the darkness, debating whether moving is worth the effort. Then you hear the cough again. Same corner, same girl. It's quieter this morning. Not because she's recovering, but because she's weaker. Her body is too exhausted now for the dramatic wrenching fits. What emerges is a whisper of sickness, like the last puffs of a dying chimney. You sit up and wrap your shawl around you. The air trapped beneath your blanket is already colder than your skin, and it makes you shiver as you release it. You cross the floor, barefoot on the freezing stone. You crouch beside her and call her name, gently. She opens her eyes, barely. You press the back of your hand to her forehead. She is hot, burning, the kind of heat that doesn't come from bedding or fire, but from the body struggling against itself. You feel her breath, shallow and foul, like damp metal and old milk. She attempts to speak, but only a strained wheeze escapes. She won't be working today. You both understand this. You tuck the blanket more snugly around her and slide your only spare scarf beneath her head. She manages a weak smile. Or perhaps it is simply the way her face settles when she tries to draw breath. You rise and survey the cellar. Your other roommate remains asleep, turned towards the wall, one hand protruding from beneath the covers like a small branch. She stirs slightly as you pass, but does not awaken. You dress quickly, pulling on yesterday's layers while your breath clouds in front of your face. The coat crackles as you put it on. The moisture has frozen it stiff once more. Your fingers are already protesting. You flex each one, coaxing life back into them. They don't fully straighten. That has become customary. Upstairs, the shared hallway is just as frigid. You reach the basin near the window. The water is solid again. You chip at it with the back of a spoon until you've broken off enough to splash onto your cheeks. It stings, but you need to feel something. This morning you move toward the main room, where other tenants are beginning to stir, wrapping scarves around their heads, lighting small stoves with the last scraps of coal, rubbing their hands over flickering flames that are almost immediately extinguished. You sit with them, not to eat, merely to exist. No one speaks. There is nothing to be said. You listen to the muffled sounds of London waking, a cart rumbling past, the hollow clop of a horse's hooves on frozen stone, the distant clang of a church bell. Someone opens the front door and curses softly as a draught tears through the stairwell. You think about the girl downstairs. She won't be the final one to succumb to illness. Winter always exploits the weaknesses in people, in structures, in morale. You have witnessed it happen year after year, not with grand drama, just a silent disintegration. And in some homes, the cold is more than just a struggle. It is a required posture. Consider the governesses. You've known several girls your age or younger hired to live in wealthy households and care for someone else's children. They occupy rooms upstairs, eat after everyone else, and must always appear composed. You once saw a governess reprimanded for wearing gloves at the dinner table. Her fingers were blue, but gloves were not ladylike, said the lady of the house while sipping tea next to a roaring fire. The girl nodded, apologised, then fainted 50 minutes later from the cold. You remember that event because it taught you something vital. Cold is not only a physical hardship in this city, it is a performance, and if you fail to maintain your role, even for a moment, it is noticed. You step back out into the cold. But now you are observing more closely, not just the ice on the pavement, but the people who are carrying out their performance through it. You pass a young governess standing perfectly still near a wrought iron gate, holding the gloved hand of a child in velvet boots. She is fully dressed, stiff bodice, long skirt, with no visible coat, only a shawl meticulously folded over her shoulders. Her expression is tranquil, serene, but her lips are pale and pressed tightly together. The child chatters about his pony, oblivious to the chill. The governess offers a courteous smile, her breath clouding lightly with each exhale, while her fingers clutch the child's in barely controlled tremors. She is freezing, but she cannot show it. You watch her for another moment, then continue walking. You know her type. Employed, but without protection. Housed, but never secure. She would be scolded if her hem were damp, if her cheeks were too red, if her gloves had a tear, if her posture suggested even the remote possibility of discomfort. Her duty is not to keep warm. Her duty is to be perfect and unseen. You turn the corner and almost run into a clerk in a starched collar, his coat so thin it is practically paper. He mutters an apology without looking up, clutching a leather briefcase to his chest like a shield. His shoes are impeccably shined, but the leather is cracked along the seams, and the laces are tied with frayed string. He is another type of performance. Clean-shaven, upright, proud, until he coughs suddenly, bending over with the sheer force of it. His entire body convulses. He swallows hard and keeps walking, his gaze fixed straight ahead. You pass shopgirls lined up outside a millinery, brushing snow from their skirts with stiff, reddened fingers before the shop opens. Their hats are tidy, their faces powdered, but one of them has wrapped strips of cloth around her ankles beneath her stockings. You glimpse it as she adjusts her hem. She sees that you've noticed. Neither of you says a word. Respectability does not include insulation. In fact, in Victorian London, the more respectable you are expected to look, the more lethal winter becomes. Poor people layer whatever they can find. Shawls, newspaper, fur scraps, even potato sacks if necessary. But the respectable are obligated to wear the correct items, not the warm ones. Silk gloves instead of woolen mittens, satin slippers indoors, even when the floor is cold as a tombstone. You once heard of a society woman who died of pneumonia after attending a winter ball in a sleeveless gown. The doctor diagnosed a common cold, but her maid said she was shivering before she even left the house. And you've been fortunate enough to never have to pretend you're warm when you aren't. You reach the post office and step inside. It's just as cold as the street, but at least the wind is absent. You stand in line behind a row of clerks, all wearing rigid collars and vacant eyes. A girl behind the counter is tapping a ledger with blue-tinged fingers. You wonder if she can even feel the pen. When it's your turn, you speak softly, courteously. You tuck your hands under your arms while she retrieves the parcel. Something wrapped in brown paper, secured with string. You don't know the contents. It isn't yours. You are delivering it for a neighbour too ill to leave her bed. The clerk thanks you without meeting your gaze. She turns her head to cough, then suppresses the rest. You take the parcel, nod once, and head back out into the cold. You are starting to understand now. The frost outside is only part of the hazard. It's the cold you are forbidden to show that is the most damaging. By the time you return to the cellar, the light has completely vanished. You could mistake it for late evening, but it is barely past 3. This is how winter operates here. It condenses the day into a single prolonged shadow, pulling morning straight into night. You step inside and are met with a profound silence. The drip has stopped. That is the first thing you perceive. The tin cup by the wall is full, frozen solid, the overflow forming a brittle ring around its base. No one emptied it. No one moved it. That, too, is a sign. You look toward the far corner where the girl lies. She has not stirred. You walk quietly, each step cracking over straw and frozen cloth. You kneel beside her. The scarf you placed beneath her head is damp with exhalation, but no new breath is being taken. You remain there for a long time. No weeping, no cries for help. What would be the purpose? You have witnessed this before. Cold does not always kill through frostbite or starvation. Sometimes it simply weakens a person, gradually eroding their body until the slightest cough precipitates a final collapse. You think she had a name, something gentle like Elsie or Mary, but she rarely spoke and no one inquired. There will be no funeral, not a proper one. Someone will carry her out the back way and inform the city clerk. The city has a system for this, a pauper's death, a cloth shroud, a mass grave when the ground thaws, if it thaws. You stay beside her a few more minutes, your hand resting lightly on hers, still warm. That is the hardest part. You stand and go back to your mattress. You sit, not because you are tired, but because that is all there is left to do. Sit, wait, endure. Later upstairs, the other tenants speak in low voices. One mentions she hadn't eaten for 2 days. Another remembers hearing her cough last week, sharp as a snapping twig. Someone else wondered aloud if they needed to inform anyone, and if so, about what. The conversation quickly died out. Nobody wanted a confrontation with death. In the cold weather, you step outside for air, though the very notion of fresh air seems like a harsh mockery. The sky is dark and bruised again, and the wind has started to pick up speed. You pull your scarf tighter around your neck. You can still feel the taste of the post office smoke clinging to your tongue. You walk for a few blocks with no particular destination, and then, as you turn a corner near the tenement buildings, you hear it. A deep, rhythmic coughing sound. It isn't just one person, it's dozens, an entire building, coughing as if it breathes through a single sick lung. You halt where you stand. The windows are dark. A few small candles flicker weakly behind the grimy curtains. A door, cracked and old, briefly swings open, then slams shut again. Somewhere inside, a child begins to cry. The sound is short, sharp, and goes unanswered. This particular building, this entire street, is clearly ill. You do not move any closer. Instead, you stay at the far end of the block and watch the steam rise in gentle plumes from each chimney, one after the next. You recall reading that London hospitals would frequently run out of beds by the middle of January. That is when the temporary winter wards would open. Church halls, poorhouses, even old warehouses, all quickly lined with straw sleeping mats and filled with people who cough. The city administration referred to it as charity, but it was nothing more than isolation. A designated place to confine people just like her, the young woman down in your cellar. You let out a slow breath, your exhalation a pale mist in the surrounding darkness. Tomorrow you will return to your job. You will let the others know. Someone will be responsible for carrying her body out. Someone new will quickly arrive to occupy her empty space. That is the grim reality of winter. It never stops. It never hesitates. It simply keeps moving forward. You walk back toward home in silence. No one speaks to you. No one asks about the weather, the streets, the package, or the girl. The cellar itself feels like it is holding its breath. The other occupants are pretending they are unaware of what has just occurred, because acknowledging it would force them to feel something, and feeling something would mean slowing down, and winter will not permit that. You take off your heavy boots. The ice that clung to them outside now melts into a small puddle at your feet, soaking immediately into the bottom edge of your skirt. You step carefully over it and go back to your corner. The girl in the furthest cot is still lying there. But soon, there will be a knock at the door. A clerk, a stretcher-bearer, a solemn man with a ledger and a lantern who will refuse to look you in the eyes. They will remove her quietly. No religious rite, no final words. You remember what an older resident once mentioned. People depart this place more silently than mice. You sit down on your narrow pallet and wrap your shawl tightly around your shoulders, pulling it closer and closer until it feels like a protective second skin. You do not speak. No one else does either. The room has fallen silent once more, broken only by the slow, persistent drip of water thawing from a pipe directly above. Plink, plink. You find yourself contemplating how many sick rooms must be filling up right now. You think about the public infirmaries with their long rows of straw beds where women lie with cloths over their chests, coughing painfully into rags that are already stiff with dried blood. You think of the little girl coughing across the hall you saw the week before, her mother vigorously rubbing mustard oil onto her ribs, praying for it to draw out the cold. You reflect on how close you are to becoming one of them. It requires very little. One bad day, a slight change in the weather, one night that is too cold, a draft against your spine, a wet boot worn for too long, a single missed meal. There are people who have spent their entire lives just a step away from the sick room and do not even realize it until winter gently pushes them across that boundary. You remember a woman who lived in the room upstairs 3 seasons ago. She was quite strong, working as a cleaner in the city offices, walking to her job every single morning before the sun rose and still returning home with her hands red and raw from scrubbing marble floors. She caught a serious chill walking home one evening, getting soaked in a sudden snow flurry. Her boots were cracked, her stockings threadbare. The following morning she began to cough. 4 days later, she was gone. No one even knew her family name. You stand up and relight the small candle stub sitting on the windowsill. Its faint glow barely manages to reach the wall opposite, but you look into it anyway, letting your gaze rest in the flickering warmth. Outside, you hear the distant rattling of a cart. Moments later, the expected knock comes. You open the door. The man is professional and polite. He does not speak much, simply nods toward the room, steps inside, and kneels by the girl's pallet. His movements are efficient and practiced. You know he performs this task 20 times a day, perhaps more. She is gone in under 2 minutes. The room is quieter than it was before, yet somehow it feels much heavier. You sit down again, slowly blinking. The candle is nearly spent. The small flame dances. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will arrive, and someone else will occupy that corner. Perhaps someone already has. In this city, the sick rooms are never empty for very long. You walk past the corner where the match girls typically gather. There are fewer of them present today. Maybe it is the intense cold, or perhaps the spreading sickness. Or maybe it is simply what happens silently when winter continues to drag on and children vanish one by one, not with any drama, but through the slow wearing down of hunger and frost. The youngest among them cannot be older than 5. She sits perched on an upside-down crate, her legs swinging back and forth above the freezing cobblestones. Her toes are bare, covered only in strips of cloth that barely manage to stay put. She holds a bundle of matches tightly, eyes wide, her nose red and running, lips moving in what could be a tune, a silent prayer, or possibly nothing at all. You stop and bend down beside her. "Cold today," you say gently. She nods, without looking up. "Sold 2 bundles," she whispers, then adds, "Only need 1 more." You do not ask what will happen if she fails to sell it. You already know. Her coat is 2 sizes too large, obviously made for someone older with hips and shoulders. It hangs off her like a loose tent, the sleeves heavily bunched up at her elbows. You notice something small, sharp and shiny at her wrist, perhaps a strip of tin foil wrapped like a bracelet, a piece of leftover chocolate paper catching the distant lamplight. A small treasure. You hand her the only coin you have left. "Not much," you say, "enough for 1 bundle." She blinks, looking up at you, uncertain. "For the last one," you assure her. She nods and presses the match bundle into your hand. It feels warm from her tiny fingers. You do not really want it, but you accept it anyway. The transaction must feel earned. She needs to know she performed an exchange for it. You leave her sitting there, humming again, her shoulders shaking slightly, not from the temperature, but from something deeper, a weariness that does not belong on someone so young. Further down the path, you pass a small boy running without shoes. No footwear at all, just tattered trousers, a scarf that is more holes than fabric, and a loaf of bread clutched to his chest like a priceless trophy. You do not know if he stole it. You truly do not care. Children here learn quickly. There is a certain warmth in perpetual motion. As long as you are running, leaping, or shouting, you are currently alive. The instant you sit still for too long, the cold begins its slow victory. You reach the narrow alley behind the bakery, where another small group huddles close to the refuse bins. 2 girls and a boy, all older than the match girl, but still years away from adulthood. One has a noticeable burn mark on her forearm, probably from a hot stove. The other is coughing so violently she cannot speak. The boy gestures toward a soot-blackened tin can holding a tiny fire. It is hardly more than a large candle, truly, just small bits of crate wood and paper smouldering inside a metal cup. But it draws them in like desperate moths. They reach their hands toward it, laughing weakly at how little heat it provides. You join them for a couple of minutes. You all just stand there, hands outstretched, backs hunched, eyes half closed. You recall hearing once that Queen Victoria, lit 1,000 candles for Christmas one year, that her enormous dining room remained warm even during the harshest blizzards, and her pianos were kept perfectly tuned with fresh lemon oil so the delicate ivory keys would not crack from the cold. You wonder what she would think of this scene. Likely nothing at all. A girl nearby offers you half a potato. It is cold and raw, but it is food. You bite into it slowly and nod your sincere thanks. It crunches like a crisp apple and tastes faintly of earth, and yet it is an act of deep kindness, and you accept it, because in a winter like this one, children have very little to offer. But whatever they do give, they give it entirely. You remain with the children for a while longer, hunched near the flickering tin fire. As the light begins to dim and the wind grows sharper, one of the girls tucks her hands beneath her knees to attempt to keep them warm. The boy pokes at the dying embers with a small twig, trying to coax one final flame from a blackened sliver of crate wood. A sudden blast of wind rushes down the alley and lifts the edge of your skirt. You grab it just in time, but not before the chilling cold slips underneath your layers like a piercing knife. The girl next to you notices your reaction. "It's going to snow again," she mutters. You look up at the sky. She is correct. The clouds possess that heavy, ominous look, low and greatly swollen like bags that are ready to burst. The last thing any of you truly need is fresh snowfall. It conceals the underlying ice, it soaks your already damp shoes, and it hides the meagre scraps you might otherwise find to burn or to eat. The boy abruptly stands up and announces, "Privy," before quickly disappearing around the nearest corner. You wince. It reminds you that that unpleasant task remains to be dealt with too. You make your way down another small side lane toward the public outdoor privy. It is essentially nothing more than a simple brick box with an open roof, a rough wooden seat, and a door that will not latch securely. There is already a line of 3 people ahead of you. A man in a work coat, a pregnant woman with completely cracked shoes, and a small boy bouncing nervously from foot to foot, trying desperately to stay warm. The odour hits you well before the cold does. You finally step inside, and the first thing your eyes register is the frost. Frost clinging to the wooden seat, frost covering the metal hinges, frost on the cold stone floor that manages to bite right through your thin boots and up into your ankles. You steady yourself with one hand pressed against the wall, not because of the dirt, but for proper balance. You absolutely do not want to fall. Slipping in here would be more than just embarrassing, it would be extremely dangerous. You have heard the terrible stories. A woman fell and knocked herself unconscious the previous year. Another man's coat snagged on a nail, leaving him stuck there for half the long night. You even heard that a person froze to death on one of the seats, either because he was drunk or sick or simply too exhausted to continue. You do not know if these specific stories are factually true, but you believe them nonetheless, because in a winter like this, nothing is too bizarre to be real. You finish your business quickly and exit without making any eye contact with the person next in line. Your breath fogs up thick and fast. You walk quickly, arms hugged to your sides, attempting to bring your body back to life. Your knees ache painfully. Your fingers sting sharply. Your ears feel as though they have been sculpted from ice. Back near the alley, the children are gone. The small fire is completely extinguished. Only the tin can remains, tilted on its side, now cold and black. You pick it up, holding it for a brief moment, then set it carefully back against the wall, as if preserving a sacred relic. You walk on, your boots leaving prints in the slush, now quickly crusted over with fresh frost. You pass a lamplighter with a very long pole nudging the gas jet high above your head. The flame sputters to life. He does not look down at you. He is clearly in a great rush. It is already late, and the city has miles of street lamps left to light. You wonder if he has ever successfully lit one in time to prevent someone from slipping, or if he has ever helped a child find their way back home, or if he is simply one more figure being quietly consumed by the cold, the deep fog, and the early darkness. You return to your dwelling. The cellar is silent. A new girl has already arrived, currently curled up in the recently emptied cot, her face entirely hidden by her scarf. You remain quiet, and she remains quiet, but she will quickly learn, just as you did, just as they all do. Because in a Victorian winter, even young children must be fast to understand. You do not simply wait for warmth, you actively hunt for it, borrow it, steal it, or become the warmth yourself. You wake abruptly in the middle of the night to the inevitable call of nature and the sense of dread that accompanies it. You try to ignore the urge. You shift restlessly under your blanket. You change your position. You count backwards from 100, willing your body to wait patiently until morning. But there is no negotiating with a full bladder when the temperature is only 3 degrees above freezing and your walls are visibly sweating with frost. So you rise quietly, moving very slowly. No reason to wake the others, especially the new girl. She is still curled up tightly in the far corner, completely unmoving except for the faint rhythm of her breathing. Let her keep what little rest she has managed to earn. You clumsily pull on your coat, not because it will offer real warmth, but because its pockets contain a half-used candle stub and a small box of matches. You slide your feet into your boots, which have frozen into curved, rigid shapes like the husks of old loaves. One lace is barely tied, the other you simply pull tight and hope it holds. You push open the cellar door and are immediately met by a gust of wind that makes your ribs contract painfully. It is not just cold, it feels violent. It tears at your sleeves and slips beneath your scarf like water flowing under a door. You make your way toward the privy with stiff legs and accelerated steps. It is always much worse at night. You are well aware of this. The wind is more biting, the sky is darker, and the entire world feels significantly more menacing. Even the snow looks harsher, iced over and gritty, as if it has been lying in wait for you. The stars, if they are even out, are concealed. The moon is a shapeless smudge of pale milk behind a curtain of thick fog. When you finally reach the outhouse, you pause and stare at the door. A thin, clear sheet of ice has entirely sealed it shut. You pull once, very gently. Nothing budges. You tug harder. The old wood groans loudly, then gives way with a piercing shriek that seems far too loud for this late hour. You quickly flinch, waiting. Nothing follows but the sound of the wind. Inside, the seat is uninviting. You do not want to do this, but there is absolutely no other choice. You manage to finish quickly, bracing your hand firmly on the cold wood, meticulously careful not to shift your weight too much. You hold your breath. The air is heavy and damp, with the smells of rot, ash, and something far worse. You try not to let your mind dwell on it. Then you are finished. You bolt from the seat, heart pounding in your chest, eyes watering, half from the foul stench, half from the fear of slipping again on your way out. You step onto the street and instantly freeze, this time not because of the temperature. A figure is standing motionless at the end of the alley, simply standing there. You cannot make out who it is, not at first glance. Then they step into the pale moonlight, or whatever light there is, and you recognize it is one of the boys from earlier, one of the match sellers. His hands are buried deep inside his coat and he is clearly shaking. He spots you and manages a grin. "You're brave?" he says plainly. You blink. "It's the cold that's brave," you murmur in response, too tired to manage a clever reply. He laughs and the sound comes out as a rattling wheeze. "You got any bread?" You reach inside your coat, finding a crust, now hard as iron. You toss it across to him. He catches it, takes a quick bite, then winces. "I'll wait until morning," he decides, pocketing the crust. You nod once. The two of you stand there in absolute silence for a while, both staring at opposite ends of the street, neither of you quite willing to be the first to turn back and disappear into the dark. Then he waves once, turns, and walks away into the fog. You do not see exactly where he goes. but you remember the look in his eyes. Not simple hunger, not even just cold, but a deep, clear calculation. Because even the smallest children in this city must learn one very unpleasant truth. It is not just the food you compete for, it is time itself. Warm minutes, safe minutes, empty privies, available fires. In the London winter, even the darkness operates on a brutal queue system. You return to the cellar, your boots leaving small melting lakes where the frost on the soles begins to thaw. The candle is almost completely used up, its stub casting a feeble halo no bigger than your palm. You slip back onto your pallet, but sleep does not return easily this time. Not after the privy, not after the boy, not after that unforgiving wind. You stare up at the ceiling, though there is nothing to see but profound blackness. You count the slow drips again, listen intently for any creaks in the floorboards above, and try hard to forget the seat's icy kiss against your bare thighs. But your mind drifts, as it inevitably must, to the people who no longer get up in the night. Not because they no longer need to, but because they simply cannot. You think of the older tenants, the ones in the upstairs rooms who have stopped leaving their beds entirely. There is an old man 2 floors above who has not been to the privy in 3 days now. You're aware of this because someone was forced to clean a bucket for him. They often say it is just a natural part of growing old, but you know the truth is different. It is the cold, always the relentless cold. It systematically eats away at movement, at basic dignity, at memory. 1 minute you are shrugging off the wind, feeling proud of your scarf and your stamina, and the next you are too stiff to even sit up, simply waiting for someone younger to remember that you are still there. You eventually fall asleep, instinctively curled tightly around your own breath, and wake to the sound of a commotion. A loud knock, a voice, then 2 distinct voices. You sit up slowly, your spine cracking audibly like a box of pins. A man is standing in the hallway. He is calling out for someone, for her, the new girl, but she is already gone. Not dead, just vanished, disappeared before the break of dawn. She probably realised what this place truly was, and wisely chose to leave before her body could catch up with the bleak reality. You perfectly understand. It is not the kind of place you stay in for any length of time, if you have any other option. The man leaves, sounding frustrated. He mutters something about laundries, about girls who refuse to follow simple rules, about how he had a much-needed shift waiting for her. The door shuts, quietly. The profound silence returns. You crawl out from under your blanket and look at the empty cot. Her scarf is still lying there, a small piece of brown wool, badly frayed at the ends. She must have left in an incredible rush. Or perhaps she simply could not carry everything with her. You do not touch it. Later, in the common room, someone brings news. A man was discovered behind the tavern last night, collapsed near the privy. His legs curled up beneath him, as if he stopped mid-step, frost covering his coat, breath long since gone. They say he was clutching something tightly in his hand. No one knows for sure what it was. Some claim it was bread. Others insist it was nothing at all. You do not ask. You eat the little you possess in silence, the others doing exactly the same. Everyone is thinking the same exact thing. At least it was not me. It is a thought that comes back more and more frequently the further you get into the winter. You dress for work. Your gloves have not fully dried overnight, and the cuffs make a crunching sound as you pull them on. Your coat smells strongly of damp wool and faint smoke. You have stopped noticing the odour. You head toward the door, but then you pause. Something unusual is happening outside. You step into the street and instantly realise what it is. It has stopped snowing. The air is completely still. The sky is the colour of dull pewter. The street is slick with ice but strangely calm. No wind, no sleet, no flakes swirling around like ash. Just an absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels exactly like the breath held just before a major storm. You walk slowly, your boots crunching deliberately over the salted slush, and you physically feel it. A distinct shift. Not actual warmth, not yet, but a definite pause. The city is holding perfectly still, if only for a brief moment. You inhale deeply, and for the very first time in weeks, you cannot see your own breath. The first fire is already extinguished when you return. Not because it ran out of fuel, because someone else got to the hearth before you and took your place. That is the way things work here. Heat belongs to no one person. It belongs to whoever manages to reach it first. You do not mind very much. The residual warmth that remains is barely enough to warm a piece of dry bread, let alone an entire room filled with bodies. So you gather your few possessions and retreat to your designated corner of the cellar. Your blanket is still noticeably damp from last night's heavy frost. The shawl you hung near the stairs is frozen completely stiff at one end. You snap it gently, shaking off the ice crystals that fall like fine glass dust onto the floor. You sit down and you wait. That is what the nights have become now. Extended waiting sessions. Waiting for the frost to creep across the beams again. Waiting for your matches to finally run out. Waiting for your fingers to stop their intense tingling, or your eyes to stop watering, or the persistent ache in your spine to finally settle into something dull and constant. Your breath curls up and vanishes quickly. Then you hear the footsteps, not down here, but upstairs. A heavy stomp, then another. A voice raised sharply in frustration. Then the sound of shuffling feet, like someone pacing back and forth. You recognize the sound. It is the family from the third floor. 6 people living crammed into 2 small rooms. One of them is a baby, barely able to walk, whose cries have been getting thinner and weaker these last few nights. The mother's voice cuts through the ceiling again. Not angry, but absolutely desperate. You know that specific tone well. You quickly throw on your coat and climb the wooden steps. By the time you reach their door, it is already open slightly. The mother stands just inside, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes are red-rimmed and exhausted. The baby is not crying loudly. He is just whimpering, soft and deeply choked, as if the cold has taken firm hold of his throat. There is a small boy sitting cross-legged on the floor with a single tattered quilt wrapped around his shoulders. His lips are blue, his nose is crusted over. He's not even looking at you, just staring blankly at the empty fireplace as though staring might magically fix it. You do not bother to ask what the problem is. You already know what has happened. The last blanket they had is far too thin. The meagre firewood is completely gone. The baby is too cold now to even scream. You glance quickly around the room. Nothing at all is left to burn, not even scrap paper, not even old rags. You reach beneath your coat and pull out your own blanket, the one you have been desperately saving. It is not luxurious, it smells strongly of smoke and mildew, but it is vastly superior to what they currently have. You hand it to her. She stares at you as if you have just offered her the moon. Then she takes it, quickly wrapping the baby first, then the small boy, tucking it around them both with the practiced care of someone who has done this hundreds of times and still feels utterly incompetent. The father enters from the other room, his face pale grey, his shoulders lightly dusted with snow. He nods at you once. That is all you receive. No thank you. No spoken words. Just the simple nod. You nod back to him. That is the unspoken agreement. You leave silently, your boots echoing softly in the stairwell. Back in the cellar, it is significantly colder than before. The communal fire has completely died out. The coals are black and cold. You lie down on your pallet with your coat still firmly on. It is thin, but it is all you possess now. And yet you would readily give it away again because some nights true warmth does not come from what you are wearing. It comes directly from what you are willing to completely give away. The next morning greets you, not with any bird song or a glorious sunrise, but with a terrible coughing sound. Rough, hacking, rattling, awful coughing coming from the upstairs rooms, from the hallway, from behind the cellar door. It sounds exactly as though the entire building is wheezing painfully in unison, the kind of sound that makes your own throat tighten just from hearing it. You sit up ramrod straight, moving very slowly, your joints stiff, the back of your neck clammy with cold sweat. You do not feel specifically ill, not precisely, just incredibly heavy, as if your limbs were dipped in wet wool and left to dry directly on your bones. The girl lying beside you stirs slightly. She does not open her eyes. You shake her very gently, and there is no reaction. Then finally, a deep grunt. She rolls over, alive, just moving slowly. The street outside is noticeably quieter than it usually is. That should feel like a good thing, but in winter, quiet London never is. It means that something else has gone terribly wrong. You step outside, fully bundled in all your layers, and you catch it immediately. The milkman is not shouting for customers. The fishmonger's cart has not yet passed by. There is no heavy coal dust hanging in the air, only a few stooped figures trudging silently toward the workyards with their scarves wrapped tightly up to their eyes. You join them, your feet aching inside boots still soaked from the day before. As you reach the corner, you pass an older woman you have seen dozens of times previously. She is perhaps in her late 40s, always wearing a brightly patterned floral shawl like a piece of proud armour. Today it is conspicuously missing. She is wearing a man's jacket, far too large and badly torn at the sleeve. Her lips are so chapped they are actively bleeding. She refuses to meet your gaze. You instantly know what transpired. She sold the shawl. It was not just for the money either. It was to buy crucial time. Time indoors. Time spent near a grate. Time where the wind could not climb down her collar and directly into her lungs. You cross paths with a child handing out flimsy leaflets, the white scraps fluttering like falling snow. He attempts to push one into your hand, but his small fingers are so red and stiff he is unable to manage the transfer. He turns away, drops it before you can even touch it. It lands face up. You catch a quick glimpse of what the paper says. Keep warm. Fever season has officially begun. Your stomach drops instantly. Not again. Last year the fever hit immediately after the first severe cold snap. Just when people desperately believed things couldn't possibly get worse, they did. And not just any fever. The kind that stubbornly lingers, the kind that burns incredibly hot and then leaves a deep chill in its wake that takes the elderly, the young, the frail, and anyone whose lungs are already half filled with the soot and persistent fog. You remember your neighbour, Mrs. Kettle? She was very strong. She took in laundry even throughout the winter. She smoked a pipe, claiming it helped clear the chill. She openly laughed in the face of frostbite. She died suddenly in February, only 2 days after beginning to cough blood onto her bedsheet. You walk faster now. At the workyard, they thrust a heavy shovel into your hands. You are tasked with clearing snow again, this time near the canal. The wind coming off the open water is absolutely brutal. It cuts through you like a knife rather than just stinging. One man collapses halfway through the morning and is immediately dragged away to the side. No one speaks a word. The foreman just mutters, "Keep going." You comply. You keep going because stopping means guaranteed freezing. You keep going because someone else is already intently eyeing your shovel, your post, your entry on the ledger. You keep going because this is the simple way winters function here. The cold takes the slow, illness takes the unlucky, and hunger slowly claims all the rest. And yet somehow you still manage to feel lucky because for the moment your legs can still move, your breath still fogs, and your stomach still painfully growls, which ultimately means you are still here. You've come to know the difference between a rough winter day and a truly punishing one. Today is punishing. You don't even need to open your eyes to be certain. The atmosphere tastes of metal. Your quilt, still clinging to the slight warmth your body can muster, has stiff edges, like it tried to frost over in the dark and couldn't quite manage it. Your fingertips burn, not from the chill, but from the sudden rush of blood after being nearly numb. Your joints audibly click as you rise. You are too weary to make a sound of discomfort. Downstairs in the cellar, there is already activity. Someone is walking back and forth. It is probably Albert, who claims the cold purifies the lungs, yet wears layers of trousers and curses at every draught. He's complaining quietly about the ice that is forming inside the window panes upstairs. You push yourself to stand. There is no work today. The docks are solid ice, and the carts carrying coal could not make it through the mire that currently passes for a street. Even the constant city smog has ceased to drift. The city has gone quiet, unnaturally still. Outside, the mist is so dense, you could practically store it in your pockets. You step into it, and it seems to consume you entirely. And there, somewhere between the basement entrance and the shop entrance, you begin to detect it. The faint sound of ringing. Not the happy kind, not for holiday celebrations or church services. These are subdued, flat, and muted. They are coming from wagons being pushed slowly through the side streets. You instantly recognize them now. They are the carts for the dead. The illness is spreading. You cannot see the bodies themselves. They are wrapped in sheeting, stacked 2 or 3 deep, covered with what looks like burlap sacks or worn-out drapes. The man pushing the wagon has a cloth wrapped over his nose and mouth, but he is still seized by a wet, hacking cough. You turn your gaze away and continue your path. You are not yet ill, but you feel it in your chest, the slight whistle in your breathing when you move too quickly, the heaviness pressing behind your eyes. You tell yourself it's just the frigid air. It's always just the cold. You arrive at the market area, or what remains of it. Most of the sellers have packed up. The apple vendor is gone. The woman selling old meat pies is gone. Only a single man remains, selling waxy tapers from a splintered box. His breath plumes as he tells you the cost. You purchase one. It costs more than a loaf of bread used to. You head back, holding the candle, considering how strange it is to crave a source of light more than food. On your return, you pass the butcher's errand boy. He is younger than you, perhaps 9, maybe less. He has a wicker basket strapped to his back and panic in his eyes. He is running, not walking, across the slick, slush-covered cobblestones, losing his footing once, but never falling. You wonder what he's fleeing from. Or perhaps both. You reach the cellar door, push it open, and the odour immediately hits you. It is not smoke, not damp earth, not decay. It is sickness, thick and bitter, like sodden fabric left too long in a dark spot. Someone is coughing, someone else is whimpering. You recognise the sounds instantly, not from memory, but from simple survival instinct. You place the candle down but do not light it yet. Instead you move forward and simply listen, because now the real problem is not staying warm, it is survival. You do not panic, at least not right away. Instead you settle near the far wall where the moisture is worst and the outside draft is strongest. It is odd how quickly the freezing air seems like an ally. It feels cleaner, at least safer. Nothing can spoil in this cold, can it? That's what people claim, that the fevers cannot tolerate the chill. But here, in the cellar, it seems the illness has settled in comfortably. You listen once more. The young woman in the farthest corner is breathing heavily, not quickly, not shallowly, but just loudly. Her lungs rattle like broken machinery. You look over and see her tucked beneath 2 blankets, one pulled up past her nose. She does not move. The man next to her keeps a distance, shoulders hunched, staring into the shadows, as if focusing hard enough will magically make her well. You know that expression? You have worn it before now. Someone murmurs your name. You turn and see the boy with the missing piece of his front tooth. He occasionally runs deliveries for the bakery a couple of streets away. He always smells vaguely of fresh dough. He extends a small piece of fabric for your mouth. He rasps. His voice is rough. You secure it over your face without speaking. Soon others start doing the same. Neckerchiefs, aprons, tattered cloth soaked in cheap vinegar. anything to keep the breath of the sick away. It doesn't matter if it truly helps. It only matters that it offers the feeling of safety. The cellar feels different now. It is no longer just a place to sleep. It is a place for waiting. You wait for the disease to choose someone else. You wait for it to pass completely. You wait for a signal from above with good news, work, provisions, anything at all. But the signal does not come. Nobody wants to enter a dwelling where the sickness resides. You find ways to be useful. You empty the communal bucket. You wipe the floor with old, cooled broth water. You help rotate the few blankets toward the meagre fire, which is really just a single lump of coal in the hearth trying its best to resemble heat. You do not speak unless spoken to first, and even then, voices are subdued now. You conserve your breath. Later that evening, you lie down with the cloth still tied across your face. You wrap your scarf around your head, not strictly for warmth, but to create a physical barrier between yourself and the room. The candle you bought earlier remains unlit. You cannot bring yourself to strike a match. Something about a flame now feels threatening, too alive, too much like an open mouth. So you remain in the dark. You remember the distant, muffled bell of the death cart. You remember the girl who disappeared. You recall the sound of coughing from the floor above and realize you have not heard it for some time. The fever is migrating. Or perhaps it is done with the people upstairs. You close your eyes and attempt to sleep, but your chest feels constricted. Not painful, not yet, just noticeable, as if your lungs have become something you must consciously manage. You pay attention to them. You regulate your breathing. You bargain with yourself. If I am still breathing in 10 minutes, I will let myself sleep. If I wake up coughing, I will leave the cellar. If she gets worse, I will go to her aid. But mostly you think about the morning, about how you will walk to the pump and stand in line for the slightly warm water you will have to boil, about how you will attempt to make a half crust of bread feel like a proper meal, about how you will force yourself to smile at someone just once, so they have a small memory that you are still here. Because in winters this severe, the worst outcome is not the low temperature or even the sickness. It is disappearing without a sound and no one ever realizing it. You wake up to the sound of something breaking. It is still early before the first light filters in through the cracks, but your body registers the change instantly. A different type of cold, sharper, more consuming. The kind that doesn't just settle into your bones but starts to feel like it is dissolving them. The noise originated from the corner. A sharp crash, followed by a startled yelp and a low grunt. You sit up quickly, straining to see in the darkness. It is the older man with the cloudy eye. Mr. Turner, perhaps, or simply the pipe man, depending on who you ask. He is sprawled on the stone floor, his hands reaching toward the meagre fire pit, or what little is left of it. The metal fire grate is broken into pieces. He had tried to tear it apart for additional fuel. No one immediately moves to help him. Not yet. You hear a person whisper, "He has gone crazy." Perhaps he has. Or maybe he is simply colder than everyone else and finally reached his limit of endurance. Regardless, the metal is twisted, the bricks have scattered, and the only functioning source of heat in the room is now gone. For a few moments, no one makes a sound. Then a hushed voice from near the wooden stairs says, "We will freeze tonight." No one contradicts the statement. You spend the next 60 minutes attempting to stack fragments of discarded furniture into a makeshift pile for burning. An old three-legged stool, a loose drawer front, a piece of bed frame that requires 3 people to loosen from the corner. Every piece of wood sacrificed feels like tearing away a bit of your future comfort. But there is truly no alternative. The small pile reluctantly crackles to life, smoky and inefficient. It produces almost no warmth, but the people in the room instinctively gather toward it like insects to a weak lamp. Even Mr. Turner finds a spot nearby, mumbling something about the grate being faulty anyway. No one bothers to disagree. That is when the steady dripping sound begins. It is coming from directly above you, a slow, rhythmic tap. At first, you assume someone upstairs left a container overflowing. Then you realise the ceiling itself is leaking, thawing from the inside out. The layers of frost that accumulated between the wooden boards have started to melt, not because of warmth, but because the intense cold outside is changing state. It is now wet. It is no longer rigid and dry, it is simply moist. And moisture in a winter in London is infinitely worse than dryness, because it soaks into everything, because it penetrates deeply, because once things become saturated, they remain that way, and nothing can dry without sunlight. You feel the sleeve of your heavy coat. It is already damp once more. You check the ceiling for signs of mould. There is always mould somewhere. The boy next to you coughs once sharply, then sniffs. He does not bother to wipe his nose, only pulls his scarf tighter and stares into the new fire. You realise you have not stepped outside the cellar in 2 whole days. You need to go outside, not to breathe clean air. There is none of that, but to regain perspective. The walls of the cellar are starting to feel suffocating. The air in the room smells of burnt cloth and sweaty, damp feet. You step out and instantly regret it because the streets are becoming waterlogged, not deep flooding, just enough water to fill the gutters and creep up the edges of your worn-out boots. Melt water. It looks harmless, gentle, even reflecting the grey sky. But it conceals the most awful thing of all, the thick sludge. That disgusting combination of melting snow, soot, horse manure and ash. It is absolutely everywhere. You attempt to walk around it, but there is no dry patch of ground left. Every step is a gamble. Your boots are thin and worn. You feel the deep chill rising with every squelch. You pass a man hauling a bucket of coal dust, not coal, to try and scatter over the slippery pavement. He looks at you, shrugs his shoulders and says, "It's better than nothing at all." You nod your head. He is correct. It is always better than nothing. You try to keep moving, partly to generate a little warmth, partly because the street feels hostile, as if standing still for too long will allow the sludge to rise and pull you under. The fog is a bit thinner today, but not gone. Instead of a solid wall, it has become a thin curtain, dense enough to make faces blurry, but thin enough to give the feeling of being watched. You head toward the baker's shop, or where the bakery used to stand. You haven't seen his window lit in days, the comforting sourdough smell long absent. But sometimes, if you are lucky, his son leaves the charred crusts in a metal tin near the entrance. First come, first serve, no explanation required. You turn the corner and stop moving. The tin is there, but it is empty. Someone has already claimed the scraps. Instead, you crouch down next to the wall and wait, pretending to fuss with your bootlace. You count your own breaths, watch the feet of passers-by. Most of the boots are like yours, scuffed, soaked, and missing their laces. Some people have rags tied around their feet. One woman has scraps of newspaper wrapped around her shins. Every face is looking down until one is not. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, is looking directly at you. His hair is completely saturated, his eyes are red and strained. He lifts his hand and holds out half a bread roll. You blink at him. You cannot recall the last time someone offered you anything freely. You reach for it slowly, but before your fingers touch the bread, a sharp voice intervenes. "Hey, that belongs to us." An older girl, perhaps his sister, snatches the roll from his grip, slaps his arm and quickly pulls him away. They disappear around the corner before you can utter a single sound. Gone, just like a quick dream. You stand up again and press your hands to your empty stomach. The pain is dull now. The acute feeling of hunger has morphed into something milder, merely an echo of itself. That is truly the worst realization. You stop feeling it, and when you stop feeling the hunger, that is when it finally begins to win. You make your way back toward the cellar, your feet dragging, your boots squelching loudly. Every single step sends a spray of street filth up the back of your leg. Your coat feels heavy now, weighed down by absorbed moisture and grime. And just before you reach your door, you hear it. A scream. It is short, high-pitched, a child's voice coming from the alley next door. You stop and listen. You wait a moment. Silence. You hear it again. Faint. Then absolute quiet. You know you should keep moving. You do not. You turn the door handle and descend into the cellar, where the small fire has almost extinguished and someone is carefully tearing pages from a fragile old book to keep the tiny flame going. You sit down, pull your heavy coat tighter around you, and pretend not to hear the next ragged cough. But later that night, the high-pitched scream follows you into your restless sleep. Not the noise itself, but the way it registered. The raw edge of it, slicing through the winter city like glass. And as you lay there, you ponder, as you have countless times, how many others are huddled cold in the dirt, waiting for a spring that seems forever delayed. You contemplate the fate of London if the cold clutch never breaks. And for the first time since this long trial began, your mind doesn't turn to blossoms opening or to the warmth of brick walkways. You only see stillness, nothing but silence, no vendor calls, no church bells, no sound of clearing throats, just mist, eternally. The calendar says it's February now, though that distinction means little. Time has blurred, softening its edges, like a piece of bread left soaking too long in thin soup. Every day mirrors the last. Pale skies, wet leather, chapped skin, the heavy scent of stale rations and kerosene. But this day brings a change. Today you are faced with an unbearable task. The young girl in the corner, who had struggled for breath for a week, is still. Not absent because she was moved elsewhere, but gone because she is motionless, unbreathing, quiet. No one speaks the word, which is forbidden, and that is the root of the problem. Because someone must dispose of her. This cellar cannot afford to become a literal grave. You remain seated, gazing. No one meets your eye. Even those older folks, the ones who have lived through this before, look down quickly, suddenly absorbed by their threadbare shoes, the bare wall, or the dust settling on the last crumb of cheese. Finally, the young man with the chipped tooth rises. He says nothing, only looks at you, directly at you, as if to prompt you. Come on, you are the strong one. Are you? You feel no strength, but you give a slight nod. You walk to the far end, to that space where blankets are always inadequate and the meagre light never quite reaches. You kneel and gently touch her shoulder, half expecting her to pull away. She does not move. Her body feels unnaturally light, as if much of her essence has already departed. You avoid looking at her face. You lift her carefully. She weighs no more than a bundle of laundry. Together, you and the boy carry her slowly up the stairs. Every tread creaks, like a sudden shout. Every breath you take feels like an apology. The outside air hits you with force, wet, contaminated, uncaring. Where are you even supposed to take her? There is no designated site, only the decaying courtyard near the old tannery. That is where others have been left. You move quickly. The street is almost deserted, save for the grim figure with his dead cart. He observes you, a curious, not unfriendly, but silent glance, and keeps moving. You reach the courtyard, choose a hidden spot, and lay her down behind a splintered crate. You speak no words. There are no prayers left to say. You start back, but not before noticing something. Someone has drawn a mark on the cellar door. You pause. It is a crude X, blurred and hurried. You rub it away with your sleeve, but you understand its message. Sickness. Here. You stand still for a long time. You stay outside, your fingers hovering near the door, uncertain whether you dare to open it again, whether you should even re-enter. But where else is there to go? You step inside. They ask you nothing. They already know. You sit close to the faint fire, such as it is, and hold your hands out, not from cold, but because they feel detached. Not frozen, just fading. You close your eyes and murmur something. It is not a prayer, but a demand. How many more? That night the cellar is unusually subdued. No one coughs, no one whispers, just the constant small spitting sound of the remaining fuel. The weak glow reduces everyone to shadows, incomplete, hunched, and hesitant. No one risks raising their voice above a murmur now, as if loud sounds might attract a danger worse than the fever. You rest your back against the wall, knees drawn to your chest, staring at your worn boots, the soles failing yet again. There's no point in trying to fix them, not when the pathways are still flowing with a mix of filth and ice. Not when you still have to walk every day merely to find food, or what passes for it. You reach into your coat pocket. The last piece of candle is still there. You had almost forgotten its existence. You pull it out, feeling its density in your palm, smooth and cold, slightly misshapen from your body's pressure. You consider lighting it, just to watch a flame, just to remind yourself that something in this world can still produce light. But you stop. Because a girl is sitting next to you now, maybe 12, maybe younger. You don't know her name. She rarely speaks. She is only watching the candle in your hand as if it is the most wondrous, most sacred object she has ever encountered. So you offer it to her. She blinks, then accepts. She takes it with both hands, gently, as though receiving a priceless gift. She holds it to her chest and curls up tighter, her eyes wide and fixed. You watch her drift into sleep, and for the first time in days your heart clenches in a different way. Not from the chill or the hunger, but from an ancient feeling, a deep whisper that you are still human. You wonder how much longer that will last. A cough breaks the silence. Not from the girl, from someone older. On the opposite side, deep, wet. You hear them move under their rough blanket. No one gets up to help, not out of malice, but because they cannot. There is nothing left to offer. The man with the cloudy eye begins to sing again. It is always the same tune. Something about flowing water and being home and bread that is still warm. He sings as if he is already somewhere else entirely. And perhaps he is. Perhaps his mind found a way to escape first, and his body is simply catching up. You fall asleep at some point, sitting upright, still wrapped in your coat. You dream of heavy fog and intense heat and snow that floats upward. When you wake, your fingers are stiff. Someone has taken your scarf during the night. You feel no anger, only a tired understanding. Outside it is still dark, but a different kind of darkness. One that hints that morning might arrive if you are patient. You listen carefully. The city has a background rhythm in winter that never entirely ceases, even when everything else seems dead. London breathes through the walls. Pipes clang. Rats scurry. Distant carriages jolt over the cobblestones, their wheels splashing through the miseries of yesterday. You stand up because you must, because there is no virtue in remaining still. You tie your broken boots one last time. You cinch your coat as tightly as you can manage. You step over the man who is still humming and past the girl still sleeping, the unlit candle clutched in her hand. And as you ascend the cellar stairs, one creaking step after another, you whisper the same question. How many more? But this time, you mean. How many more mornings? How many more chances to begin again? Because even in this city of smoke and sorrow, winter has not achieved total victory yet. You step outside into a world that cannot decide what it is. It isn't raining, but the air is damp. It isn't snowing, but the rooftops are layered white. The fog hangs low but refuses to settle. And the sun, if it exists at all, is hidden behind a sky so featureless it resembles paper soaked in dishwater. Your boots splash into the first pool of water before you even finish securing the door behind you. It will be one of those days. You begin to walk, because when you walk, your blood circulates. And when your blood circulates, your feet don't freeze solid. It's a simple exchange. Today you choose a different path, not seeking food, not seeking labour, but seeking evidence that the world still holds firm edges, that it will not remain like this forever. You pass a row of butcher stalls, all shuttered. The awnings slump under the weight of ice. One of them has a notice taped to the window. Gone to Gravesend. No one has bothered to remove it. Why would they? Farther on, you approach the Thames. The odour hits you first. The river never completely freezes. It just festers. Every retreating tide leaves a fresh layer of decay. And when it does crust over, the ice traps the stink beneath, a layer so thin it would crack under the weight of a small bird. There is a man crouched near the bank with a fishing line, but he is not pulling in fish. He is dragging something else, something long and pale and unmoving. You do not stay to see what it is. You turn away because this is not the confirmation you came for. You want to find something good, or at least something unequivocally real. You make your way toward the edges of Covent Garden, where the vegetable vendors used to be. There is nothing left now, just overturned crates, abandoned and chewed by rodents. But then something catches your attention, a flash of colour. Tucked low between two ruined stalls, a small cluster of red. You move closer. It is a bunch of radishes, real, perfect, red as fresh blood. You check your surroundings. There is no one in view, just the radishes, waiting. You pause, not because you don't desire them, but because you do, because you understand how this city operates. Nothing this appealing is left unguarded without a trap. Yet your stomach dictates your action. You reach down quickly, grab the bunch and pull. And that is when the thin cord pulls taut. You never saw it. Fine as a thread, tied to the leg of the crate. You fall backward as the crate tilts, then crashes. And abruptly, from behind it, a small figure moves. A child. No more than 6, dirty, silent, staring right at you. This is her device. The radishes were the lure. You simply stare. She does not speak, just reaches out, takes the radishes back and retreats into the fog. Gone. No malice, no cruelty, just a desperate hunger. You remain sitting on the cold paving stones, shocked, and then surprisingly you laugh, because somehow, incredibly, you feel a sense of lightness, not because you managed to eat, but because she outsmarted you. Because if that tiny girl still possesses the ingenuity to lay a trap in this frozen city, then maybe, just maybe, the world has not exhausted its cleverness yet. Maybe there is a future left. You pull yourself up. Your stomach rumbles again, but this time it sounds less like complaint and more like cautious hope. You wander the city for a time, not really looking for anything specific, just existing, allowing the day to unfold however it will. The air stings your ears, but your thoughts are elsewhere, fixated on that small face, the precise execution of her trap, the boldness of her silence. You wonder how many other small empires are hidden within the broken infrastructure of London. Kingdoms governed by inventive children, by scavengers and fog dwellers. You begin to imagine them. A boy with mismatched boots guarding a tin of matchsticks. A pair of twins trading body heat beneath an old stage in a theatre. A quiet girl who creates maps of the city's dry spots by scraping them into the bricks with a piece of chalk. Perhaps the adults have surrendered, but the children have not. And maybe that is the true difference. You pass a newspaper seller, well, a boy standing where newspapers were once sold. He isn't shouting headlines. He's selling kindling now. Ragged broadsheets, 3 for a penny. His hands are stained black from handling the paper. You nod slightly. He nods back. That is all. Further along the road, you pass a dog curled up in a doorway, one eye open, watching, evaluating, waiting. You drop a small piece of stale bread near its paw. It doesn't move, just sniffs once and resumes its dreaming. You start to notice things you hadn't perceived before. A line of clothes, inexplicably still moving in the air between 2 buildings. A shattered window with a vase containing 3 withered daisies. A woman sweeping snow from her front steps, humming a melody that predates your earliest memory. These details shouldn't exist here, but they do, and that strikes you as profoundly important. You cut through an alley you rarely use and find yourself behind the apothecary's shop. The back door is slightly ajar. Warm light spills out in a narrow, golden beam like a slash of gold across mud. You hear voices inside, a genuine conversation. Not pleading, not coughing, just people talking. You stand still, absorbing the glow. You catch the smells of medicinal herbs and vinegar and something that resembles cinnamon. You do not knock, you do not enter, you just listen. For 5 whole minutes you let that light embrace you like a blanket you did not have to steal. And when you finally turn to leave, it is not hunger or the cold that accompanies you. It is that sound of talking. London has not completely stopped breathing, not entirely. There are still hidden spaces where candles are lit. Still people who speak without fear. Still lives being lived in defiance of the frost and the grime and everything the city is throwing against them. You walk back, slower this time, not to stave off the cold, but to honour the feeling of warmth. Each bootprint feels like a deliberate claim. I was here. I remain here. When you reach the cellar, you push the door open with care. Someone has managed to repair the hinge. The air inside smells of burnt wood and something faintly sweet. Someone found sugar beets. The girl with the candle is awake. She holds it up high like a small torch. Her face is grimy, but her eyes are clear. She says nothing, but she nods. You nod in return. You sit down. You breathe. You survive. And somewhere deep in your core, a tiny spark flickers. Not a roaring fire, but a quiet resistance. Because winter has not defeated you yet, and until it does, you will keep moving. The last major frost is supposedly coming soon. That is what the old woman with the glass eye insisted yesterday. She claimed her bones could sense the earth changing, just slightly, just enough. You wanted to believe her then. You still want to believe her now. But this morning the frost is thicker than ever. It creeps up the inside of the windows now, forming delicate spirals like lace crafted from pure ice. Your breath fogs in front of your face as you wake, and the ends of your fingers are too numb to untie your boots without rubbing them first. Someone has located coal, only a small amount, but enough to keep the stove burning for a little while longer, enough to make the air feel less painful, and that has become the new measure of hope. Not truly good, just less agonizing. You move slowly. Everything is slower now. Every movement is calculated, carefully rationed, like a rare commodity you cannot afford to waste. Even laughter extracts a price. Lungs that are too vulnerable, cheeks that might crack from the exposure. There is a rumour that the soup kitchen on Hanbury Street has reopened its doors. No one is certain, but the rumour alone is enough to send people shuffling in that direction. Shoulders hunched, eyes focused on the ground. You decide to go too, not because you believe they will have anything left, but because you prefer the act of walking to sitting. You pull your scarf tighter, your new one stitched from old socks, and step out into the morning fog. The streets feel like an imprinted memory. You. You have walked them so many times that your feet know every broken flagstone, every place where the gutter overflows, every single step where the ice is treacherously thin. The constant smells are coal smoke, horse waste, rotting cabbage, wet wool. But today there is another odour, a scent you haven't encountered in months. Bread, freshly baked bread. You halt. You turn your head slowly, afraid that if you move too quickly, the aroma will disappear. There, across the street, behind a window smudged with soot, a bakery is open. The metal shutters are halfway raised. The door is cracked just enough to glimpse the golden arc of a loaf resting on a wooden shelf. You cross the street without conscious thought. Inside, it is warm, almost impossibly warm. Your face stings from the sudden shift in temperature, and your eyes tear up even though you are not crying. A woman stands behind the counter, her hair secured, her apron marked with flour. She does not smile, but she does not frown either. You hold up your hand. You have 1 penny, not enough for a whole loaf, but enough for the broken crusts. She nods. She wraps a handful in paper and hands it to you. It is still radiating heat from the oven. You thank her aloud. She nods again, softer this time. Outside, the air hits you like a blow, but your hands are full of warmth. You eat the first piece immediately, right there on the curb. No spread, no conserve. Just bread. Simple, warm, substantial. You close your eyes. You chew slowly, and for a fleeting moment you are not cold, you are not exhausted, you are not a phantom wandering the gutters of London. You are alive. And spring is inevitable. You can feel it coming. Not in the sky's appearance, not in the temperature gauge, but in the way the bread yields softly against your teeth, in the fact that someone baked it, someone shared it, someone cared enough to light a fire despite the cost. That, more than anything, feels like a new beginning. You head back through the market alleys, passing pools of water rimmed with slush that look almost innocuous, until you step into one and feel the biting truth seep through your boot sole. But you do not swear this time because your stomach is full, or not entirely full, but warm, and that changes everything. You pass 2 chimney sweeps, huddled in a doorway. They are playing a game with small stones and broken chalk, scratching out numbers as if they are calculating great fortunes instead of merely passing time. One of them looks up and sees the piece of crust in your hand, the half you decided to keep. He does not beg, he just watches. So you hand it to him, and just like that, you have accomplished something. You have contributed something to another person in this city, where most people scratch and hoard and retreat. You shared. It is a minor act, a crust, but the boy consumes it with the reverence of a banquet. You continue walking, and in the distance you hear bells. Not the deep tone of church bells, not the hourly chime of clock towers, but small sleigh bells, tiny, high-pitched, and distant. You stop. There are no sleighs in this part of the city, no smooth snow to ride on, but the sound floats to you anyway, light as an illusion. You look down an alley where a child has tied small metal bits to a stick and is dragging it along the bricks, making his own music. He grins when he sees you. You raise your hand in a slow acknowledgement, and he bows with exaggerated importance. The city allows you this sight today, just for a moment. That evening, back in the cellar, the small stove burns a little brighter. Someone has brought in tallow candles, salvaged from an abandoned chapel. The air holds a faint scent of wax and wood smoke, and your cheeks feel flushed, as if the heat is radiating from inside your body. You are sitting near the girl with the candle again. She still has it, you notice. Still has not lit the wick. It has become something more than just a source of flame now. It is a statement. You look around. The coughing has not vanished. The pervasive dampness has not lifted, but something has changed. The silence no longer feels so oppressive. People are talking softly, carefully recounting memories of things they enjoyed before winter, before the cold consumed everything. Someone starts humming a quiet song. It is not mournful. You lie back, your arms folded under your head, and for the first time all season you do not feel like the cold is victorious. It struggles to win. It still claws at the cellar door, still bites at every opening in the wall, still resides in your bones, but it has not broken you because you are still walking, still breathing, still capable of noticing the colour red when it appears in a world of grey. And when the frost finally begins to release its stranglehold on London, when the first daffodil pushes through the frozen soil like a yellow miracle, you will be there, not merely to observe it, but to truly feel it, because you endured and winter did not. So now, as the fog settles low and the embers in your consciousness fade, you drift off under a weight heavier than any coat you've worn all day, yet softer too. The city's cacophony recedes, the rattling carts, the dripping eaves, the echoing coughs behind cellar doors. What remains is the stillness, the quiet that only follows enduring something so long, so cold, so relentless. You recall the taste of the bread, the steam rising from it like a quiet promise. You remember the girl's unlit candle and how it seemed to glow regardless, simply by being held. You recall how laughter felt, sharp at first, like a momentary pain in your ribs, but then slowly dissolving into a welcome warmth, and now you feel it again, just beneath your skin, that small, insistent flicker. Hope. Not the loud, triumphant kind, not the marching band or the bold rooftop declaration kind, but the subtle kind. The kind that survives bitter winters and deeper cellars. The kind that waits patiently through slush and soot, through ice, thick boots and frozen milk pails until it can unfurl a single petal, one at a time, in a patch of stubborn earth somewhere between Hanbury Street and the old bakery. That hope is yours now. Keep it safe. Let it shine a little, even with your eyes closed, because the city is quiet, and you made it through, and spring just beyond the edge of the fog is stirring in its sleep.